Is required to be over the Public Meetings Act. The notice requirements have been satisfied. The meeting dates for the year are confirmed at the annual meeting. The postman of the Public Bulletin Board and lobby of the Municipal Center and published in the Press Journal. The record for the first 10 days of the new year. Notice of the special meeting is sent to the Press Journal. The record is current like no other news and is posted on the Public Bulletin Board and the lobby of the Municipal Center. Roll call, please.
Councilman Barzalato? Absent. Councilwoman Lamostra? Here. Councilman Platter?
Here.
Councilman McDermott?
He did call me. He is on his way. He's stuck on the George Washington.
Councilman Rouse?
Here.
Councilman Barnes?
Speak here.
Mayor Rustin?
Here. Okay, I'd like to give everybody a sense of the format of tonight's meeting. Our schedule is as follows. From 7 o'clock to 7:45, we intend to have 3 of our professionals give us an overview of this project. That's the police chief, the architect, and the engineer. From 7:45 to 8:45, the council will take that time to discuss the project with the professionals and perhaps among themselves a bit. At 8:45, we're going to open up the meeting for 1 hour for public comment. We're going to ask people to speak 3 minutes at a time. Once everybody has spoken once, if others want to speak a second time, that would be fine. And at 9:45, no later, the council will go back into deliberation to discuss what's going on and to discuss any possible actions they may or may not want to take. At 10:30, by law, we are required to adjourn. I would say that with the exception of the 9:45, all of those times are a little bit flexible. So we're going to start now with our professionals, and I don't know, is there a specific order, Julie, to have one?
Yes. Our presenters in order of appearance are Michael Bruno, Police Chief, Mr. David Halls, Borough Engineer, and Mr. Joseph Frangiosa, Architect from the firm of Arcari and Iovino. I would also like to note for the audience that Mr. Bob Burns, our construction official, is in the audience, as well as Mr. Gene Vinci, our Chief Financial Officer. Chief Bruno?
Before the chief starts, I just want to remind everybody, this is just a presentation. There will be no questions from the audience at this particular time. However, when it's time for the audience participation, I believe our professionals will still be here. And although the questions should be addressed to the chair, the response may come from anybody either here at the table or some of our professionals. Thank you.
Good evening. As they said, I'm Mike Bruno, I'm the police chief here. I was asked to come tonight and give an overview of this project. I'm going to try to do it in approximately 6 minutes. It shouldn't take very long. I'll start off by saying that on May 5th, 1963, this municipal center was officially dedicated. It's 47 years later, and many renovations or additions have occurred in a number of areas except the police department. Almost 50 years, the whole world has changed since then, but our building hasn't changed one bit. In 2003, my initial proposal was made to the Police Commission during our regular meeting about looking to expand our space or provide a better space for the police department. They rightfully asked me that a proposal be made to the full governing body. So several meetings were arranged with architects, by the administrator then, Joe DiGiacomo, to discuss our needs, start data gathering, and prepare for a presentation. In January of 2004, I made a formal proposal to the council, including a PowerPoint presentation, fact sheets, and information about our needs and what we were seeking. Once presented to the governing body, actual planning began with the architects. The final plan was presented, and the council requested the architect change the plans time and time again. First, to move the locations of garages, to reduce its size, to change the exterior appearance, and many other reasons. In April of 2004, I issued a memo to the council after receiving the third such request for plan changes. In it, I explained that their new plans with reduced square footage eliminated any storage space, placed interior areas that should be connected on opposite ends of the building, and made the dispatch center even smaller than it is now, and some other problems that I saw. But in that memo, I wrote specifically that while I realize that any expansion is an expensive proposition, my goal is to spend the money wisely and only once. If we take into account potential growth and changes in function, we will build a structure that will stand the test of time. Obviously, even then, I had it in my mind that I wanted to meet all of our needs, past, present, and future, and spend money wisely one time. Well, by July of 2004, the architects had been asked by the council to draw up 6 different schemes. Finally, one was settled upon, and the council asked me if this plan would meet our needs for the next 25 years, and I repeatedly told them it would not. It would just meet the immediate needs we have in the present. The project went out to bid, and all the bids came back within our budget. That was immediately followed by a group of people who understandably wanted to save the trees that would be taken down for the project. The Environmental Commission at the time said they didn't know anything about the project, even though 2 council members sat on that commission, and it was the subject of newspaper articles, it was in the borough newsletter, it was on the borough website, it was discussed at several advertised public meetings. Finally, the issue of the Rossi was raised, and the project was scrapped. There was even the famous petition against it. Some people signed it because they really wanted to save trees. Some signed it because they were erroneously told that the project would eliminate Frog Park and even eliminate sleigh riding. Both would have been unaffected. And some others had their own agenda. The local papers reported that the project was canceled because it was determined that the planned location for the new building was part of the recreation open space inventory, but in fact the project was canceled before that determination was ever made. The land was subsequently added to the Rossi, eliminating the possibility of ever using it despite a desperate lack of space for the entire municipal complex, not just the police department. So here we are 7 years later. The borough has spent in the area of $1 million between architects and engineers' fees, soil studies, site testing, bond fees, and debt service, and we have nothing to show for it. I sat through hundreds of hours of meetings with professionals, the administrator, the finance officer, and other people. To give you a little perspective, it only took 5 years to build the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center and 3 years to build the Tappan Zee Bridge. One small Bergen County town began planning a new facility several years after we did. They moved into their new headquarters over a year ago and have twice as much modern, efficient space than we do, and their staff is less than half of ours in the number of officers they have. They also included room for potential future expansion in the event it's needed. Another agency exactly the same size as ours started planning after us, completed their project, and moved in just over 2 years ago. Our current structure is undersized, outdated, fails to comply with many OSHA standards, many state and federal mandates. It has no locker or shower facilities for female employees. It's not ADA compliant. It lacks any kind of storage at all. It is one small hallway which has no secure cell block area, no separation between public, private, and secure areas, and it's incapable of meeting the needs of any modern law enforcement agency, much less one our size. In the almost 50 years since our headquarters was built, our agency has grown in size, capabilities, call volume, and complexity, yet we're still living in a 1963 building filled with draped wires, extension cords, cluttered offices, and dangerous conditions. We cannot bring members of the public inside headquarters when we're handling a prisoner at all, because our only hallway has jail cells in it. One of my captain's desks actually faces a prisoner cell and toilet. If we have more than 3 people in custody, we have nowhere to put them, and if we have more than 2, we have to handcuff one to a bench that's stuck in our cluttered detective bureau. We have no interview rooms, no safe place to secure weapons, no armory, and many other deficiencies, yet we continue to do our jobs better than ever before. The officers actually clean their weapons on the same table with which they're supposed to eat their meals. And we have no kitchen for them to cook anything, despite the fact that the officers are not allowed to leave town the entire time that they're on duty. For years, the council has denied my requests for any radio equipment upgrades, telling me that it will come in the new building. Our backup radio is now non-functional, and 3 days ago our primary radio system failed to the point that the dispatcher was using a portable radio and a $100 scanner to allow him to communicate with officers on the road. If you think this isn't a safety issue, you're wrong. This is actually worse than it was in 1963. After all these years, I believe I'm justifiably frustrated that this project is still dragging on. So I'm going to finish very briefly with a message for the governing body from me. Every member of the governing body has met me individually and toured our facility. You have all expressed your agreement that we need a new building many times. I've been asked to justify this project time and time again in numerous work sessions, public meetings, and in writing. You have each repeatedly voted to pay each and every bill, approved every paid expert and consultant, and have already spent somewhere in the area of $1 million in the process, and that number is climbing as we sit here, because now you have architects and engineers working on plans for an addition and renovation rather than a building. I simply ask the council to make a firm decision and stick with it. Either build it or don't. As a Tenafly taxpayer myself, I don't want to see any more money wasted, and as your police chief, I don't want to waste any more of my time and energy on it, as hundreds of hours of my time, the administrator's time, and others has been wasted. If the project does not become reality, then at least use some of the funding to update our radio system and other critical technologies in our department to allow us to do our jobs. I apologize for the length of these comments, but it's difficult to summarize this in a few short minutes. I do thank the governing body for another opportunity to come and speak about this, and I thank the public for being patient. The only thing I can tell you is that our police department is staffed with 36 officers. We're supposed to be at 37, and through attrition, we've lost one. When I came here in 1985, I interviewed and was hired as the 35th officer. If you think that our call volumes and the complexity of the job that we do hasn't changed in all of those years, I'm here 25 years, you're seriously mistaken. And because I have 36 dedicated police officers, and then I have a staff of dispatchers and civilian people that work with us, I think it's unconscionable that in a town like Tenafly, they work in a place that looks like ours does. I would repeat some of the descriptions that were made by some of the council people when I gave them the tours, but I care not to because I don't want to use offensive language in 2 cases, which was used. I think every person that comes into our headquarters and gets a full tour of our facility is shocked by the lack of size, is shocked by the antiquated designs and equipment that exist in it, and is shocked that we're able to do what we do with what we have. You need only to walk into my detective bureau and see 4 detectives with their desks stacked on top of each other and see a prisoner bench directly adjacent to them and someone handcuffed to it to know that we are seriously in need. And we've been in need for a very long time. This need didn't start in 2002 when I became chief. This need existed many years before that, and we had no one that had the courage to put forward the plan. So I guess in effect what I'm doing is I'm appealing to the public to acknowledge that whatever your thoughts on this expenditure, whatever your political affiliations are, whatever your reasons are for coming out and blindly opposing something that in many cases you don't understand, that you take the time to look at what we're saying, you take the time to meet with me or talk to me, and I will explain to you fully that this is reality. This is not some political thing. I'm not a political person. I don't care who votes for it, and I don't care what they do, but your police department is in desperate need of having a modern, safe space. And if our police officers were the type that cared to file grievances and call OSHA and have inspections, we could be costing this borough a lot more money in litigation and problems, but we're too professional for that. And I think that that needs to be respected and acknowledged as well. One of the things that I hear every political campaign year and every budget year is let's lay off cops, let's demote people, let's do this, let's do that, and no one acknowledges that when you call us, and a minute after you make that 911 call, we're standing at your door fully equipped, trained, and professional, no one's complaining then. So I ask that you look at what we're asking for in terms of, is it realistic what we're asking for? It sure is. Is it possible to do it? It sure is. The funding is there, and we've been ready to go for many, many years. All I ask is that we make a decision and finally start putting a shovel in the ground and building this. I apologize for my tone, but as you can imagine, after many years of this, I'm a little bit frustrated. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, I'm David Moles, the borough engineer. I prepared the site plan for the proposed police station addition. The plan is mounted on the board here to right. This is the site plan of the entire municipal complex. The existing building is a peach color. The proposed addition is a dark brown. The building itself, the proposed addition, like I said, is a dark brown color. That's going to be located directly in the front yard of the existing municipal complex. Just to orient you with the plan we have mounted in our board, River Edge Road is on the bottom portion of the property. On the right-hand side is Foster Road, and on the rear corner is, on the top of the page, is West Clinton Avenue. The proposal is to construct a new building, police station addition in the front portion of the existing police station itself. The police station will extend out in front of the existing police station to approximately 10 feet to 15 feet out in front of the existing curb line that's in front of the police station today. Presently, with the police department has 33 parking spaces in front of their complex. When we're finished with the addition, we will also have 33 parking spaces for the police. We'll have no loss of parking spaces. And I'll show you how we're going to make that expansion. There's in terms of the site itself, the site is fairly level. It's slightly dropping in elevation from the existing municipal building down towards River Edge Road. We're building out the proposed police station so it matches the existing floor level on the existing municipal building itself. We have to artificially raise some of the parking levels so that we can make the new building addition barrier-free. But when we finish the entire complex, we'll be barrier-free itself. In terms of stormwater that we're doing, we are removing the existing lawn area and large trees that are located directly in front of the police station today. Those trees are being removed. Other amenities that are there, there's a fire department bell which has to be relocated. All of that material is being removed, and we're going to replace it obviously with the new police headquarters. So in terms of stormwater, we do increase the runoff from the site. We are proposing an underground detention system, a pipe detention system in the parking lot directly in front of the police station. That will control the stormwater and release it out towards the existing storm drainage that currently exists in the parking lot today. Also, during the construction of the police station, the police themselves have to move out. They cannot be located there anymore during the construction itself. So what I've done also on the plan is on the right-hand side is a red cross-hatch area. That is the current raw cedar open space area designated on the municipal complex. That area is to remain in a natural condition. On the right-hand side of the parking lot, I'm just going to point to it right now. The gray portion is to the right-hand side is a large parking area. Immediately to the right of that, towards Foster, there's a grass strip alongside the parking spaces. We are going to place 4 temporary trailers. Those 4 temporary trailers are going to house the police department construction itself. So there's actually 2 phases of the construction. We are independently going to hire or rent the trailers for the police department, install those trailers and the utilities necessary to the trailers, the water, the sanitary sewer, the temporary electric, telephone, to the trailers themselves. That will all be done on the right-hand side of the entrance driveway leading into the municipal complex itself. Then the trailers, as soon as you get into the municipal complex, there's parking on the right-hand side. The trailers will be located to the right of that in the grass area. So that is going to house the temporary location for the police department. Those trailers will be installed first. Those trailers will be fitted for the police department. The move will be made so that where the trailers will be fully fitted for the police department. So literally the police will just be able to move into the trailers and have a temporary home for the dispatching and the other services that they're going to continue to provide the borough. While that is going on, then we are going to be going out to bid for the building addition for the police. And all the construction, the addition itself, the parking, the drainage, and any other site improvements immediately with the building addition will be handled as the bid process. The reason I have it shown is also with the Rossi area is none of the construction itself is located within the open space area. All of that is completely within the area designated as a municipal complex for the municipal complex itself. This plan is an enlargement of the proposed addition itself. Again, the same colors, light, I don't know what that is, orange. Is the existing municipal building. The dark brown is the proposed building addition itself. The light gray is the existing parking lots themselves that exist on the left-hand side of the plan, leads into the fire department. On the right-hand side leads into the ambulance corps itself. As I mentioned before, we have 33 parking spaces. Presently, the fire department comes into the site to turn around. They enter in on the right-hand side of the common driveway with the police. If you look out there, that driveway is very, very wide, and that can accommodate the ladder trucks and the other fire apparatus. They come through the parking lot itself between the two covered aisle for the police department. They stop before they enter out of the River Edge Road, and they back into the doors for the fire department. That operation is going to have to change with the proposal. The fire department will have to stop on River Edge Road and back into the firehouse, and that's consistent with almost every firehouse that I know of in Bergen County that operates in that fashion. And this will have to operate in that fashion also. What is going to happen is we are going to narrow the driveway open. Currently it's about 70 feet wide, and we're narrowing it down to 25 feet wide. It'll be just a 2-lane driveway going in. We're also removing the grass strip. There's a grass strip presently between the ambulance corps and the police department. That grass strip is going to be removed for, I think it's for approximately 60 feet. And we are going to create a double-stacked parking area for the police department. That is going to be completely fit for police vehicles, and it will be signed accordingly. In the front of the building, we will have approximately, I may be off on my numbers, but I think it's approximately 8 or 9 spaces in front of the building itself. And that is going to have a handicap parking and then also visitor space and additional spaces for the police. On the opposite side, there'll be approximately 13 spaces along the curb line facing River Edge Road. Total is going to be 33 parking spaces on the site. In the front, the town sign, that is not going to be disturbed with this application. We do have the bell that's currently by the entrance to the police department. That is going to be moved, straddle the sign on one side of the sign. That's the way it's currently proposed. And on the other side, there's another fire department gone, I guess it is. I don't know what else to word it, right? And that is also going to be moved. So they're going to be mirroring on the sign. So the one will be on one side, one will be on the other. We are proposing replacement trees for existing trees that are being removed on the site. Those are being placed around the perimeter on the left-hand side of the parking area. And the dark area in color, dark gray area that's shown on the plan, that is actually the proposed pavement that's going to be replaced. And also the one leg that you see going out towards the left-hand side, that's actually just storm drainage that has to be relayed to get the storm drainage system to work. During construction of the site, the entire site will be fenced in. There's going to be temporary chain link fence provided across the entire perimeter of River Edge Road behind the sidewalk. But the entire area is going to be fenced off. It's also going to run up the sideline of or the edge of the pavement of the ambulance corps, and also the edge of the pavement on the right-hand side of the fire department leading out, so that the contractor will have complete access to and the only person having access to the construction area. The police department themselves will no longer have access from River Edge Road during construction. And I believe I touched basically all the points in terms of the site engineering that's going to be happening with the project.
Good evening, my name is Joseph Frangioso, I'm with Dark Area Avenue Architects. We designed the layout, architectural layout of the building. Basically, when we started this design, we were asked to investigate a maximum 12,000 square foot footprint in front of the building between the fire department and the ambulance corps, and additionally some renovation of the existing police department inside. We did our review and we were able to propose a addition footprint of under 10,000 square feet, renovated area inside the police department of approximately 5,000 square feet, and we're also able to turn over 2,000 square feet back to the municipal complex for their future needs. If you look at the colored plan, this is the existing building, and the shaded area indicates what the police currently occupy. The plan below it, we have the addition in front, and then in the middle we have the renovated area where we try to use as much of the existing walls as possible. We did keep the existing weight room that you'll see here. We expanded it slightly, and that will house the fire department and the police department as it currently does. And then towards the back, the 2,000 square feet that's being turned back to the municipal complex. Now, we were not able to bring this in as part of the renovated area because there's an egress corridor that separates these two portions of the building. and is trying to reuse that space, it would basically impede on the security of the police department. So that's why the dividing line is that corridor. The elevations you see over here are, we were trying to work within the existing brick of the building and basically trying to make it work with the language of what you already have. Most of the facade is brick. The bays are intended to replicate the ambulance and fire department. The one change you'll notice is the entrance to the police department is a storefront glass entrance, which would help to draw the public in and notify them of the entrance. Going to the plan, we tried to separate based on the function. One of the most important things is, as the chief described before, when they bring in a prisoner, there has to be limited interaction or no interaction with the rest of the building. So the sally port basically drove the front corner of the building as the secure area where the processing of prisoners would occur. So with the new plan, the police can bring a prisoner into the sally port and then directly into the processing without ever having to enter any other part of the building. It would allow the public access to the rest of the building with no interaction with anyone who's detained at that point. The lobby from the storefront area is completely secure, so no one will be allowed beyond that unless they're buzzed in. But they have access to the dispatch, and the officers can come up front or bring them back if necessary. To this corner of the building, we have the administration, the chief, secretary, records room, captains, and then towards the back we start to get into their training rooms, conference rooms, the detectives areas, which works off of the processing, so they have direct access to that. And then towards the back we have some of the less accessible spots like the locker rooms, which work off of the weight room and reports and lunch area. Access from the municipal complex can be from this door. It's hard to see there. It will be secure at all times. There will be a buzzer on it, so people would not have to walk all the way around if there was a need to go from the administrator's office to the police department as they do now. We have looked at two-story buildings with the egress requirements and the difficulty of the site where there's limited access. It was determined that it was not a viable option. Also, the soil in front of the building is less than ideal, causing piles and structural slabs. So as you increase the height of the building, you also increase the cost of the structure. The square footage of the entire project is within 5 square feet of the standalone building, and this number, although it wasn't planned that way, as we went through the requirements for the police with the state and also the chief, we tried to reduce the square footage of each space to the best of our ability, but get the minimum dimensions required by code, and just to make a usable building that will not be obsolete within a few years. And it basically ended up being the same square footage. What we lack in stairs and vertical egress from the old standalone building, we were actually forced to put in additional square footage for corridors. And again, that was due to the fact that it is wedged between this building, and we had to make sure we don't have any dead-end corridors and create any dangerous space for the police to make sure we meet all the codes. I don't know if you'd like to get into the scheduling now, or if we should wait until scheduling. We are assuming that if we can get approval at today's meeting, that the contractor, by the time contracts would be awarded, if they were awarded at the September meeting, contractor could feasibly get the building, the shell of the building completed before winter. This would help in a number of ways, because the current environment building is that there's a lot of competition. Many times we'll have 25 or 30 bidders at any given job, and a job this size would definitely draw interest. To do it now, you would possibly be able to, use that and get a price that in a normal situation you would not be able to get. And the longer the project drags out, if we do go beyond September, they will not be able to build before the winter. The project schedule gets extended, and then the costs increase for overhead, possible increase in materials. The trailers would have to be rented for a longer period of time. There's just a number of items I'm working against you, plus the fact that springtime is basically when all contractors get most of their work, and they do factor that into their costs. So it's beneficial to get the pricing now. You are not obligated, obviously, to go ahead with the project, but we feel that would be the best chance to take advantage of the current market. That's all I have now as far as the plan.
Okay, Drew,
We're now at the portion of the meeting from 7:45 to 8:45 that anticipates discussion between the council and the presenters. So any questions that you may have, would you like to take turns with your preference?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not sure if I'm going to be ready to write you the rule. I'm going to refer to a letter from the planning board dated July 8, 2008, where the planning board had asked that whenever the governing body takes on capital projects, we ask them to review it for review and recommendation in conjunction with such actions. So has the planning board reviewed this project before we're going out to bid?
Well, let's say the planning board, I can't say that the project has been before the planning board, but the project has been reviewed by the construction official.
No, but I have a letter that I'm looking at here, and it says, upon adoption of the master plan, whenever a governing body or other public agency has a project which involves the expenditure of any public funds, the body shall refer the action involving a specific project to the planning board for review and recommendation in conjunction with such master plan, and shall not act thereon without some recommendation until 45 days have elapsed. So this new set of plans, this is from just then, from the first time around. Have we done that?
not for the expansion. We did it for the standalone.
And then my second question is, have our officials or professionals in the building department reviewed these plans before they go out to bid?
Yes, they have.
And last time we had gotten a list of all of their comments, so they're ready to go? On this specific building, has the building department done their review of the plans?
Yes, I believe they are, but I would suggest that we ask Bob Burns.
Yes, Dave, we've done our review, and the comments that we had were given to Mr. Frangioso this morning, and we are waiting in. So there's nothing major within our comments that we just need some clarification on a few things.
Thank you.
Hi, so, I guess for the architect, so, I think what in the beginning, you may have said 1,200, but I think you meant 12,000. Maybe you said it right and I heard it wrong, it's a little hard to hear, but the original assignment was to look at the same amount of square feet as the new building as a renovation.
No, we were asked to look at a maximum of 12,000 square foot footprint for the addition, plus renovation within the existing building. And to minimize as best we could, like I said, we were under 10,000 square foot for the addition and 5,000 for the renovation. So it was that was the maximum we could go based on the parking, and there was also setbacks that were required. So that was a problem.
So we did recognize when we asked for the addition, when we wanted to get a cost estimate for the addition, that there might be some renovations required because you have to make these two buildings work together. So we did acknowledge that there would be some renovation work as well.
That was part of the request was to include both addition plus renovation.
Whatever would be required so that the buildings would work together.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that came up when we got this, and the reason we wanted to have this, is that As it's now proposed, it's 14,000 square feet, and there's 2,000 square feet being returned to the municipality. And so, you know, if you go back and you say, well, if we took out that additional renovation work, using the estimates that you have, it looks like it would save about $400,000. And I'm not sure we can save that money given your plans, but that seems to be one area that, at least from my point of view, I thought we were just going to restrict this to the police. And so it's grown in scope from when we asked to get that cost estimate in February.
I'm not trying to understand, you're saying 2,000
I
should
think I
be used
can,
in
I
renovation?
think I can. If what I'm understanding is that you're talking about the renovation of the Borough Hall space that's going to be returned back to Borough Hall.
So,
That
yes,
is
I
not
think-
included in this. What's included in this is the renovation of our existing headquarters that will be attached to the new construction of the building, and the small amount of space that's going to be turned over to the Borough Hall is not included in this law. That would be something that'll have to be looked at later.
Okay, so if that's not included, because it comes to 14,000, and I thought maybe that's the explanation between, you know, the two numbers you have are 9,000 and 5,000, right? So it's basically 14,000, you get the exact number. I thought that might explain why the 2,000 is
There was
wrong.
no, there was no cost factored in. We discussed that specifically in a couple of meetings, that we were not going to factor in cost to renovate the building portion that is going to be turned back to Borough Hall, because there's no definitive plan as to what that's going to be.
Okay, so I understand that.
Most of our building is just empty cinder block squares, so it's going to be remaining empty cinder block offices until such time as the borough will decide what to do with it. And then at that time, we'll be able to be looked at as what the decisions will be.
Okay, so what that means is if I look at that diagram there, if I add the green, the blue, and the brown, it actually comes to 16,000 square feet.
Yes.
Okay. And so then what I was expecting was a 12,000 square foot space to be costed out. We costed out 14,000 square foot space. And I recognize that there could have been, you know, some growth in terms of renovations required to make the two buildings work together, but I would never thought it would be 2,000 square feet like that.
So 12,000 square feet was not the limit on the building. 12,000 square feet was the maximum amount of footprint we had available for the addition. That was not the total project. We were to combine the renovation plus a maximum of 12,000 square feet addition. When we went through the process, like I said, the 2,000 square feet in the back, we couldn't incorporate into the renovation because that egress corridor splits right between it, and we couldn't have a secure facility with an egress hallway in between different parts of the police station. So that was turned back to the municipal complex so that they could use it in the future. Right now, it could be used as offices as is. It would not be included in the construction. But then we worked through what was necessary for the police, and it ended up being 14,800 square feet, which in turn was 5,000 square feet of renovation and 9,000 square feet of addition.
Okay, so I guess what I'm thinking, what was the size of the old police station?
The standalone was 14,985.
Say the number again?
14,985 square feet was the standalone building. The total of this project with addition and renovation is 14,980. So it's 5 square feet less.
Okay, so when we were in February, when we briefed this, we wanted to baseline at 12,000 square foot. And we did recognize there would be some renovation. I guess I didn't expect it to be 2,000. I thought they would have to maybe just do some doorways or something. So to me,
But you're not, in my opinion, you're not getting what he's saying. They never said 12,000 square feet was going to be the entire project. It was going to be the footprint of what they were adding. We had always considered that we were going to include what already exists to get to the 14,000 plus foot number, because that's what we need just to get the basic elements of the building to be configured so that we can meet all of our needs, all of the mandates and everything that goes with it. It was never discussed that it was going to be a maximum of 12,000 for the project.
Chief, what the architect is saying is that 12,000 square foot number was the maximum size of the additional footprint that could be considered. The end result is we're only using 9,000 of that 12,000. for the addition.
9,900 is what the addition.
So we're not using all of the 12,000 footprint, but that really has nothing to do with the size of the project.
But the renovation size, I think, is a lot larger than, at least when we asked for the cost estimate for the 12,000 base approach without the standalone building. What I thought is that the renovation would be much smaller than this.
There was no estimate for 12,000. 12,000 was just the maximum size of the footprint that was available to us.
But the directions from that meeting were to provide a cost estimate for the work associated with building the 12,000, up to 12,000 square feet.
I don't recall that. Where that's coming from.
Does anyone else recall that we asked for a cost estimate?
Does anybody else at the table have any questions or comments?
I do, I have a question. I'd like to comment on Councilwoman Molastro's reference to the planning board letter. My question to Bill, to Jewel, does that have any bearing at this point in time on the project?
Well, it has some bearing on the project at this point in time. I think that the referral to the planning board of the prior freestanding police station, where they indicated that it wasn't consistent with the master plan. I don't know that it matters where it's located. So the expansion moved away from the expansion by addition, no difference. So I don't think that relevance to this, like I said, by doing addition is inconsistent with the prior indication that it's not consistent with that plan. I said, I don't think that the fact that now the police station expansion is being done by way of expansion of existing facility versus freestanding building makes a difference from the planning board's prior recommendation. So I don't know if that answers your question. So yes, it's relevant, but I don't know that it's relevant to say that we would not proceed with the expansion of the existing facility until the planning board makes a new determination. I don't think we need a new determination.
Okay.
It's the same capital expenditure.
I don't know that the planning board is involved in the capital expenditure side.
No.
But what's the relevance that you see?
The size of the police headquarters is shared with the master plan. So there's no material difference in size, ultimately, of our police station comparing the previously proposed freestanding building versus expanding the existing facility.
Okay.
I'm going to quote again. The New Jersey practice series on local government law states that the enactment of a municipal master plan causes any public agency to submit plans for public improvements within the municipality to the planning board for review and recommendation. The governing body doesn't have to accept the reviews and recommendations, but it's a part of doing business and having that board in. I don't know if you want to see this, but
Sure, but I don't think the planning board, their recommendation really is not as to, type of structure. In other words, versus expansion of this facility versus freestanding. I don't think so. If you want to ask Jeff to do that, because we already have the approval for the freestanding, which in terms of square footage is an increased size in the police headquarters. So the police facility itself and its size to service the municipality isn't really changing from what the planning board previously reviewed. That's certainly a different location. So, I mean, the purpose of that review, in comparing to the master plan, is to see that the size of the police facility it's not going to be inconsistent with, the master plan of the municipality. That's the purpose of the review, the plan. So whether it's, I mean, certainly if you were to move a building 10 feet over, you would say that it's the same building, you would say that, that the planning board had to review the plans all over. It's the size of the facility, number of police that will be housing compared to, master plan of the municipality.
To the team, and I guess perhaps to the mayor and Councilman Rouse, since they've done the continuity of the police commission, so whatever the answer is coming from. At the beginning of this project, 2003, I believe it was, sorry. How, and you get together with the architect and you have to go ahead to develop this concept, this idea. What's that conversation like in terms of financial commitment, financial direction? If I'm building a house, I've got a budget of $500,000, let's say. That's what I've got. Show me what you got. Did you approach it that way? Was there any restriction or guideline or anything like that?
No, because there was no way we would have a financial number to start with. So the conversation began with what elements are necessary in the building, either by function, mandate, or both. And when we laid out a list of the elements that we need, detectives, patrol, investigative, prisoner, private, secure, public, I laid out a list for them of each thing that we need. And from there, we evolved into how much space would we need for each. So we went room by room. We need this much of this much of that. Some of it's mandated by the state. The cell block things and all of that are absolutely mandated by the state. And we went through that. We came up with the layout of the building verbally as to what we would need to cover the elements of a basic police function for an agency our size. From that, the architects then went back to the drawing board and came up with a layout that would incorporate all those elements. And then from there, we tweaked it to what we thought we would need, what we thought was appropriate to the borough, what we felt wasn't necessary. We tried to keep out any fluff because, as you can see, it was hard enough getting to this point. It was 7 years later. So I wanted to make sure that every square foot would be justified. And from there, then we built out to go into discussions with the police commission, then the governing body as a whole, and then we started to get pricing in accordance with the square foot price for new construction. That's my recollection of how it went.
And Mike, since you worked for the police commission, and you actually were part of the commission for 1 year, I think, during the middle of this process, I think the financial aspect of this project really centered on the governing body. Mayor and council, police numbers were brought to us. It really didn't stop at the police commission. The police commission doesn't have the authority to approve at the governing body. It's not the police commission. And once again, I think the chief described it properly. They described the needs. The architect presented the plan that addressed those needs. They costed it out, and the cost was brought to the mayor and council and approved basically every step of the way. So the mayor and council said, we're going to go ahead with this project at this time. The financing is within what we're willing to spend. And once again, every step of the way, we have the ability, we, the governing body, to say no.
Again, to the team. At the beginning of the project, was there any discussion, interest in performing a square footage audit in anticipation of an expansion, so that we looked at how much gross square feet we had, throughout the district complex, and a needs utilization, so that it may have resulted in rejiggering the use of certain space and perhaps the more efficient use of space. Again, all focused on how how much square footage we need for the police expansion. So, is there anything like that?
Well, the problem with that concept is that there are several other departments within the borough that have been crying for additional space for a long time. You can expand some space in some other departments without worrying about how they interact with others. We're a different animal. And everything that we do is governed by the fact that we are a secure facility. We cannot have access in and out of the public unchecked. We bring in prisoners. We have violent incidents that take place in our building. Everybody in the place is carrying weapons. So we didn't look and see if we could interact with some maybe recreation space or this one space or that one. We were focused on the police department. And I mean, it's no secret to anybody at this table. The borough hall is bursting at the seams for space. The DPW needs space. The traffic guy needs space. My traffic maintenance guy has been without a workshop for 5 years because his was condemned. He's working on a corporate jack in a garage full of stuff. So we didn't have the luxury of doing these lengthy analysis to see where we could jiggle other space and move other departments. It was bad enough trying to get just the police department to get the space we needed. If we were to look, in my opinion, if we were to look to then now have to impact several other departments, I think the cost would go up, the inconvenience would go up, it would affect the functions of other departments. I think it would have been squashed right at the inception. This has been rough enough to get to this point when we still don't have a thing to show for. So I think what, in my mind, and I know I can speak for Anthony Iavino, because I don't recall how much involvement Joe had back then with the daily meetings that we were having. We were trying to do the most efficient police space that we could do. But I didn't want to get something that 5 days later was going to be completely obsolete. As I put in writing to the people back in 2004, I wanted to spend the money once, spend it wisely, and have something that would grow with us for a reasonable amount of growth that could be anticipated into the next 20 years. And I think we've accomplished that first with the standalone building, which in my opinion would have been much better because it would have given the municipal complex 7,200 square feet of space that we have now, which would allow the borough hall's growth, and that gave us all the space that we needed and then some, to also resolve some parking issues that existed. When that project got scrapped, we were stuck with the old thing of trying to put 10 pounds of sausage in a 5-pound case. And that's where we are now. And I think that what we're doing is trying to be as creative as possible, as cost-effective as possible, but we are really limited in what we can build on, where we can build, and the funding that's available. And I think I would let anybody come and look at the plans and the planning that took place and would defy them to say different. Because we had some smart, caring people involved in that from the start, and we weren't just focused on, I gotta get what I want from the department. I was cognizant of the borough, I was cognizant of the taxpayer, I am one, and I'm a borough employee. So I think that's what you got. And I think this plan, considering we're now handcuffed to a small amount of space that we can utilize, is the best you're gonna find for what we're trying to do. That's my opinion.
I'd like to just echo something she said, because I've been involved with the ambulance corps for probably 10 years or longer. One of the advantages of this standalone building would have given the ambulance corps more space, which they desperately need. If you go into the ambulance corps building, you will find there really is minimal storage space. Things are stored on the floor, on the back of the garage. So that was one of the reasons, the chief said about additional space being needed. There was a specific example of additional space that would have been provided. That's not there right now.
Hindsight being 2020, since I was at the council starting in 2003, this is not just council criticism, but criticism about the council, but self-criticism as well. Chief, to your comment about what a needs assessment would result in today, I've never heard of that. I sort of see it the same way. But the point that I do want to make is back then, and I still see it the same way today, we think in component terms. We do not think in terms of the grand plan. Taking the headquarters, police headquarters as an example, had we had the wisdom back then to say, this is going to be a big project, let's take a look at the entire complex. Let's take a look at 10, 15, 25 years out, see what our projected needs are, and how this all fits in to a grand plan. That's not to say, Chief, that the requirements of a police station would be ignored in terms of safety, security, and all of those things. It's component thinking. And I see that today, and again, it's self-criticism.
Well, if I can respond to that, I disagree. I think that we did look at the grand plan because, as I said, we looked at a secondary building which took us out, completely out of the facility, which then allowed 7,000 square feet of space for the municipal building itself and all the remaining departments to absorb and grow into. And our building that we had planned at that point was enough to carry us into the future, including taking care of parking spaces and that. I think you're correct. We did look at the grand plan. And the grand plan was squashed when that building was squashed, and now we're forced to compartmentalize because we have nothing left.
Well, maybe there was a grand plan, but it was not articulated to the council, meaning 7,200 square feet vacated, 7,200 feet vacated. Here's what we're going to do with it. I would argue that it was a grand move.
But it was
not
articulated to the council that there would be 7,200 square feet of space that the borough hall did not have up until we moved out of it, that they would now have. That certainly was articulated.
We did talk about the heat and the air conditioning, after that had to be redone throughout the building because of the...
missing the point.
Because if I recall, there was even some mention at the council level when we discussed it that the building department was in such need of new space that they were going to move them up to where the police department exists now because it would have provided them a service window and a separate entrance for contractors and parking. So I have to say that you're incorrect. We did look at that.
I think it may be the interpretation of the plan. It's one thing to have vacate 7,200 square feet. It's another thing internally, in my opinion, to say, and here's how we're going to use it over the years to grow into the service.
That's a different thing because I'm not in a position, nor is it above my pay grade to decide what's going to happen with the borough hall and the rest of the offices. I worry about the police department, but in my worry about the police department, gave the borough the opportunity to have 7,200 square feet, which was squashed. So, that wouldn't be in my design process, nor my authority to go into that. That should have been between the governing body and the architect and engineers.
I'm going to repeat comments that I've heard from past papers. And appreciate comments to address those comments or perhaps alleviate those views. And the comments I have heard is that we need that much space. It sounds like a palace. My God, it can cost a fortune. Times have changed so dramatically in 2 or 3 years. Can we really afford it now? And those are the comments that have been repeated again and again. And so I'm throwing that out there, for comment.
I'll comment on that. Quite often, you quote people that are random, invisible people that are never named and never mentioned. That could be a single person, that could be 5 people, that could be 10 people. But if any of those people would contact me, or if any of those people had sat for our meetings, they would have seen me and the architect and the other people involved articulate the need for every square foot of that space. And the plans clearly show. You can't point to a square foot of that building, but I can't tell you specifically and precisely what it would be used for. Would I like to see another 5,000 square feet added onto that building?
You can't see it. You can't see it. Come up closer.
I absolutely
Come up closer. Sit up in front. Sitting in the back. Look up front.
I absolutely would like to see additional space. This is the tightest use of the space that I can make. And even with this, we're still going to have a couple of issues in some areas of storage and things. But compared to the 7,000, I think it's 200 square feet of space we have right now, that is going to be absolutely perfect for us because it's going to finally allow us to at least have a specific area of function for every need that we have. And as I said, this isn't just because the police department wants to be more comfy and I want an office where I can stretch my feet out. We have some dangerous conditions in our building in terms of the way things are stored. I have, for example, in one small office, it's a very, very small office, I have all of our computer network hubs and all our technology. In that same office, I house the traffic sergeant. In that same office, I house the records guy. In that same office is a workstation where all the people that have to do reports and that have to sit. And in that same office, we used to process DWI people because that's where the breathalyzer was until we had a drunk tear our computer server out of the wall. And we realized we have to do something else. So this isn't something that we sat around and said, we'd like to get a palace and we'd like to, live the lap of luxury in the police department. Every area of the police department is a functional area. And if anybody did say that what we're looking for is a palace, I not only resent it, but I defy them to come say that publicly, because that's simply untrue. And if anyone who is so opposed to the thought of us having 14,000 square feet of space, I have offered many, many times, on behalf of all of you and many other members of the office, and off of that is a very small closet that we call the female locker room. It has no toilet, it has no shower, and if there's anyone in that office, they can't get in and out to change their clothes. If anybody thinks that we're looking for a palace because we want to correct that, they're sadly mistaken. Our building is so substandard, and I think a town like this, if you remember when I made the original proposal for those of you who were here, I wanted to create a department, a police department facility that the town would know was functional, was efficient, and that they could be proud of. I defy anybody in 2010 Tenafly to walk into my headquarters and tell me you're proud of it. Because I personally am embarrassed by it. And every day that I'm in it, I'm concerned about the officers that have to work in it. If a prisoner being brought in breaks away from the officers, which is not an uncommon occurrence when we're moving people into a cell, they can run into the captain's office, they can run into our server room, they can run out to the desk area where my civilian dispatchers are, or right into my secretary's office. And God forbid there's a member of the public coming through the building, they're right in the same hallway with them. And this is not something that doesn't happen. We make over 200 arrests a year. We arrest bad people. Yes, it's Tenafly, and we arrest violent people. And we have officers assaulted. We have people who resist arrest. And we take weapons from people. This is reality. This isn't us looking for a palace because I want to sit with my feet up and be the king of the palace. We kid a little bit and say we're going to get a Campari umbrella and we're going to sit outside and have cappuccino because we can't sit in our offices sometimes because if there's 5 people in the building, we've got nowhere to go. So I would present, in addition to respond to anyone who thinks that we're looking for the lap of luxury, we're looking for the minimum standards that any modern police department needs and should have.
Do we have any idea, once the building is operating, do we have any idea what the incremental cost of operating the physical plant would be to the taxpayer? Any idea? Utilities, labor, maintenance, material? Nothing, no idea. We don't know what it's going to cost once it's up to operate. Then, would I be silenced? Is that what that means?
Good question. No, we don't have specific plans.
Can we get a specific idea as close as possible by a month from now?
We can get it in far less than a month.
Okay, great. When?
We can have it by the end of the week.
Thanks for your motion. I have no other questions at this point.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for our professionals? If not, I'm just going to remind, when we're finished with this, we'll go to the public participation stage. Joe had his hand up. John, do you have something else on? Joe, please.
Okay, so I just want to come back because to the price. We got this estimate, last week or so. It's very good. It gives us a break for the new space and the renovation space. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, one would have thought adding on to a building and renovating to get to 13,000 total would actually be less than building a standalone building. At least that would be what I would guess. So I'm looking at this, and I don't want to help you too much, but just I want to understand the truth of this. It's like some of these things that are in here would have been over and above, like the trailers and the generator. So if I add them together, I come to a fair amount of money. Is it reasonable to look at this estimate from the point of view that we covered those expenses and we're still doing the construction, and then that's really the only savings we get from not having a standalone new construction building?
Are you talking about the temporary trails, Mr. McDermott?
Yes.
Well, I can tell you that when I saw the cost of the temporary trailers, I was a little bit surprised myself. And what I did was I went around town and I tried to look at maybe a reduction in cost by maybe leasing a commercial property rather than using trailers. And I thought maybe we could weigh leasing a commercial building for a year to 14 months.
I
And
actually had a different answer.
no, if that's not what you were saying, but
That's
I
not the focus of it. I'm glad you looked at that option. But what I'm really trying to understand is, if you have a certain number of square feet, it's basic construction, it's a new building, there's some rate. It's probably not 315 or 200. It's, it's some number. Without getting into detailed, specific set of plans, there's some industry standard number for this area of the world, right? And so, what I would have thought is that when we go from a standalone of one size to, an add-on renovation combo of the same size, which I think was the direction that we agreed to, if the total space would be the same, that there would have been a savings.
Typically, that is correct. However, based on the layout of the building, first of all, you have the added temporary facilities relocation, which you've covered. There's also the poor soil, which is in front of the existing building, which we did not encounter in the standalone, which caused us to design piles, structural slabs. It also caused us to increase all the steel framing for the building because it's a police building. There's a certain safety factor above and beyond what's typically used on buildings. And it was a ripple effect that went through the entire structural design of the building. So that increased the cost dramatically from what we would consider just a one-story structure. You also have to deal with the layout of the existing municipal complex and adding on to the front of that. We have a number of fire-rated walls. There's actually a 3-hour rated wall that separates the addition from the renovation. Because of the area increase that we went over, we had to have completely separate buildings, which means that the structure on either side has to be able to fall down with that wall standing. When you have firewalls, you have fire-rated doors, you have special hardware, you have all the other items that go along with that. We had limited points of egress because we had to wedge it in between the ambulance and the fire department, which caused us to add in circulation so we didn't have dead-end corridors, which again increased the footprint slightly. So it's not just as simple as, and I agree with you, in the normal case, if it's a simple building, yes, renovation is typically cheaper than new construction, but this was not that type of a situation. There's many items that we had to deal with on this addition renovation that were not encountered in the single building. And then we also have to go through the extent of additional work to the building that, typically you wouldn't think we had to do. We have to run over the top of the existing roof with new structure, strip the roof beyond that because our new building is 3 to 4 feet taller than the eave of the existing garage bays. And the way that all sloped, it caused us to go over the top, which causes roof replacement where typically you wouldn't think we would have that. So again, it's not just a simple plug it into the front, leave the existing as it is. There were many other items that we could deal with that increased the cost.
I want to just ask a quick follow-up on that. I do think it's important. I'm absolutely in agreement with the need for this to improve the space and everything like that. I don't want anyone to misinterpret the question about the price and things like that to be misheard or misconstrued that way. So I'm in agreement with the need for this and the space. I am concerned about the price, and that's why I'm asking these questions to see what can be done. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the fact that the bond ordinance for a standalone building and the estimated price for this are $20 a part is really pretty coincidental, and that the price of the renovation was driven by special needs that came up to do the renovation and the expansion, and that's why it came back up to around the same price. And the fact that it's that close just happens to be a coincidence.
Well, again, we are not estimators. We went used the previous estimate as a basis, and given the same approximate size, which it's 5 square feet off, the items that you can remove from the standalone are offset by the new issues that we have to deal with on the new addition. And it's, you know, the numbers that we gave you are within reason for the standard cost per square foot of construction typically now. Now, what I said before was there's a little bit of a benefit to going out to bid right now, is that there's so much competition out there, and we've seen a lot of the bids come in drastically lower than these numbers have indicated. And you're not guaranteed that, but you know, you have a much better chance of getting that number down.
If I can just address that, Mr. McDermott, I know I've been a detective for many years, and I've interviewed and interrogated a lot of people, and I think the question that you want to ask, and I understand why you don't want to come right on out and ask it, I'm very blunt, so I'll tell you what the answer is that I think you're seeking. We did not say, here's the amount of money that we're giving us for the standalone building, let's make sure we get the addition up to that. That is not what happened. What we did was we went back to the drawing board, we tried to look at an addition to the executive space, and again, took all of our needs, laid them all out, parlayed it into the current plan that we have now after a couple of tweaks here and there. I think I drove Joe and Anthony Iavino crazy because I was sending them my own pencil sketches by fax, and let's make this work this way. So I think that if I'm correct, that's the question you really want to ask is, did we look at that number and say, let's make sure we spend every dollar of it? I can assure you that is not the case. Everything that you have seen me do since your time on the council, whether it be budgeting, whether it be proposals, asking for something, I come in, I give you the pros, I give you the cons, and I give you the truth. And that is the truth. We did not look at the dollar figure. I looked at need, tried to build. We're stuck with this space now, what can we do with it? And we tried to get what we would have gotten in a standalone here, and coincidentally, it came out to be the same number. Is that what you were looking at?
Actually, no, I was thinking a little bit the other way, just to deal briefly that, did we produce this, you know, we didn't do a bottoms-up estimate to this new design, right? And instead what we put in is rates in cover memo, right? Or it's a cover memo to us, it's an old estimate on it, right? Okay. Those estimates, are you comfortable with them? In other words, I'm wondering if those estimates may have been, you know, just...
Again, even an estimator, it's an educated guess on what you're going to get. No one knows until you go out to bid. The last project we had, I believe the estimator had, $324 a square foot, and the bid came in at $305 a square foot. And, that's his profession. He went line by line. Again, it's within reason, and we feel that, the number we gave you, which I believe was 315 square feet, $315 per square foot for the addition, is well within reason of what a building is going to cost.
But what I'm trying to establish real briefly, because it's not that different from what the chief has suggested. It's just, that number is actually your estimate. You can get an estimator to refine it, but that's actually your number. It wasn't just done from a budget point of view.
No, this again, anytime we're asked to do this, we look at the trend of what the bids are that we've been getting recently, and that's what an estimator does, the same thing. He just does it on a more detailed basis. We didn't feel it was worth the extra $7,000 to do this, since the project is approximately the same size. We feel it's within the range of the previous budget, and the drawings are at the point now where the best number you're going to get is to go out on the street and let 30 contractors who know that they're competing over work, fight with each other, put in the best, lowest bid, and get your estimate that way. That's the true number. That's the number that matters. And that's, at that point you can evaluate it, and then you obviously have the ability to approve it or not. But, you've gone through this enough times, and the projects are so similar that it was not, in our opinion, worth the additional money to do that full-blown estimate.
Thank you for explaining the hardship of the renovation and the price increase. I appreciate that.
John?
Thanks for the explanation, Chief, and also Joe. But I have a question. Since I first received these numbers, I've also been struck by the coincidence between the numbers on the one hand and on the other hand. And as I understand it, well, as you explained, the cost of expansion, which includes renovation, is essentially an estimate, because you will not be able to find out, get a better answer until you actually go out to bid, which is actually what the next step is. And
It would be $7,000 to get a.
well, even if you spent the $7,000, you still just have a more intelligent estimate. You don't know what you're going to get.
That's true.
Until you actually go out to bid. Okay. So, and in fact, when you mentioned all of the difficulties of the new construction, what you're really doing is saying, well, here's the old building and here's the new building, and they sort of balance equally because in spite of the cost of this building, we now have these extra costs with the existing design. Right. So the cost of $315 per square foot for an addition and $200 per square foot for an expansion are essentially modified industry estimates. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're ballpark figures, general.
Okay. So again, we can't get a more accurate number, and as Joe indicated, the issue is not so much with the need for the police station or the space required, but rather with the cost. And we can't get a better idea of the cost without going out to bid. Is that accurate?
That is the only, sure way to know what the cost would be.
Okay, thank you.
Our biggest protection is when the bids come in, we have the ability to reject them. And we've done that in many cases with projects, and we either decided to not do the project or to rebid them.
I just have a question for the administrator, just on timing. If we were to go today about the bids would come in sometime late August, early September, is that correct?
The current estimate based on action today would be August 31st.
And then what is the number of days that we have to either reject or accept the bid?
We have 60 days
So-
from receipt.
We would have to take action sometime around the end of October as the latest.
Correct.
Okay. Question for the engineer. One of the issues brought up at the standalone building was environmental. Are there any environmental issues with this building or any issue of brook encroachment or anything else that we should be aware of?
No, we have a letter from NJDEP stating that there's no permits required for the proposed building. It was submitted to DEP for verification. So there's no environmental concerns with the building. So.
I'd like to just expand on that comment and just say that the architect firm came to the environmental commission to review options associated with, these type things and these type of things. And we arrived at a point where they were doing a number of environmental things in the building. There's a list of that that's on the record. And we felt that going further environmentally wasn't cost effective for the town. We endorsed the recommendations from the architect in that regard, as well as the construction environmental.
My next question is again to the architect, and I think you answered that, but I'd just like to emphasize it. In one of the discussions and meetings we had quite a while ago, there was demonstrated a problem between the seams of the new construction and the existing building. That was going to create a problem. Has that problem been solved?
As far as the roof issue?
Yeah.
Yes, we have steel that is actually cantilevered from our new structure over the top of the existing roof, and then the roof runs over the top, so that, it has been addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
I have a couple. She started expanding the trailers before and the ability to think of all the amenities
Yeah.
and things downtown.
Yeah, not being a construction person, I had no idea what the cost of temporary trailers would be to accommodate us on a temporary basis. And when I saw it, that number surprised me. So I went around town and looked at commercial spaces that are vacated and made some phone calls to owners and see if we could lease. And I thought if we could lease a commercial space, it might be less expensive for us than to set up trailers and pump electricity and plumbing and things. I provided a list to the council and the administrator of the properties that I looked at, the reasons that none of them were going to work for us either because the prices were astronomical or the spaces were just not something that would function. In one case, we looked at a place that I thought would have been perfect for us, and they were looking for $15,500 a month, I think. and it didn't include even so much as they would shovel or anything with the property. Some of the other properties, we still have to look at, if we're in a temporary space, I have to have an area for the public to be able to come in and be served. I have to have a secure area where my dispatchers can interact with the public, because sometimes we do get people that come in that are not quite right, and we have to protect our dispatchers from them. But some of them just were impossible for us to set up even the most basic areas for police function. In one case, there was a very small storefront with a very large open warehouse space behind it, but it had no climate control whatsoever, no heat, no air conditioning, no plumbing. So we would have raised our trailers would cost. So I spent about a week and a half, 2 weeks talking to real estate people and some property owners, and found that we're not going to find anything that I looked at that's going to be even a little bit cheaper or even close to what it's going to cost us for the 4 trailers.
This one's from the architect. What green or environmental energy saving functions are built into this building?
There are many, I don't have that list with me. We did do high efficiency HVAC units. We do have occupancy sensors in the rooms with lights so that they can't be left on. We increased the amount of insulation to make it more efficient that way. The windows, we made sure we had insulated windows. I know there are a few other, the lighting itself, the light high efficiency lighting. There's a few other HVAC items and electrical items, but
And there's talk one time about the design of the roof that allows the grant you can develop in the future to put solar on the roof, or is that still building?
that was what we didn't factor in solar panels.
I know it's not in this estimate, but
If you're talking about the slant of the existing, or because ours is a flat roof.
this whole building, this is all flat?
Yes, we do have one portion, the raised portion at the garage bay has a slight pitch to it, but it's basically a flat roof the entire thing. Now, they do have roll roofing that has solar on it, as an option later on down the road, but that was not looked at just due to the cost.
And my last question is the management of this project. We don't necessarily have a good track record of management of capital projects. How is this project to be managed? I don't know if that's a question for you, the engineer, or the administrator.
I believe, from our point of view, we do standard construction administration, which is not a full-time on-site, duties. Basically, we would visit the site on a weekly basis. We would review any of the submittals that are being done. We would, do site visits and just make sure that the construction is progressing in an appropriate manner. We would review any kind of payment applications. We would review, any issues in the field. But as far as a day-to-day basis,
Will you be the day-to-day manager of the project?
Yes, I will.
Supervisor, please.
As Joe pointed out, there is a provision within the contract with the architectural firm for construction management. We already have a team that's in place and meets on a regular basis. Basically, we will continue to meet throughout the course of the project, but we are already in place.
Anybody else?
So I'm trying to recall things that I heard when I first came on council about problems that existed with the expansion of Borough Hall. There was bad steel, there was bad cement poured, there was poor wiring, poor ducting. Who's going to be responsible? Who's going to look out for this?
There's also testing built into the specifications where they have to have an independent testing agency come in and test the concrete. They submit the test reports to our office for review. Same thing with steel.
And that's great to know, but to be candid and clear, we were shafted. The taxpayers were shafted by approximately $1 million. because of the reasons that I just listed. And so, you know, it's great to have this company, and that consultant, and so forth and so on. But who here is held accountable if those kinds of problems pop up? Because when we spent, and Mayor, I don't know if this kind of flowed over when you started, but Pat, you certainly remember we had many closed sessions, closed because of the litigation aspects of the discussions. We spent 1 year, and probably a lot of time before that, well, let's see, that was 2003. That project was completed in what, the 90s? So we're talking about 7 years of litigation meetings. You know, you can't not be traumatized by something like that, and that's what's motivating me to ask the question, who here is going to be responsible?
We are responsible for ensuring that all of the protections are in place. Joe mentioned the testing in terms of dealing with the physical integrity of the materials and products. We also have legal review and legal remedies which are included. So the reason that you're able to even have litigation is because you have designated who is accountable. And if any of our contractors or vendors create those problems, we will sue them. And that is your remedy for addressing those. And I would ask Bill if he would have anything he'd like to
Just to
add.
add to what Mike is saying, I mean, would not our construction official be part of the team and either be responsible for inspections or making sure that things are done right, whether we go to the inspectors that we have? I mean, obviously, we should expect the same, if not better, oversight on this job that we demand for our residents. You know, before our residents can move forward on a project, our electrical inspector inspects their electrical work. Our plumbing inspector inspects their plumbing work. I mean, I'm not sure that's exactly where we want to go, but aren't our professionals going to be part of this team?
That is entirely correct. They already are part of that team. And as I said, we have provisions within our contracts to hold the contractors accountable. So,
And of course, we have performance bonds. Again, I was around for the municipal hall problems, although I came on the tail end of it. I think the problem there was that there were multiple problems, both with the original construction and then the attempts to remedy it, and fingers pointing back and forth, particularly at the architect at that point. But, you know, when we talk about legal remedies, those are usually the things that you resort to after someone hasn't done what they're supposed to do. You know, and that's not really a satisfactory way of approaching it. The best approach is problem prevention as opposed to trying to resolve the problem. And that's what the ongoing inspections and following up, making sure what's done is done properly is all about. And that, again, is built into the contract and our procedures for that, as Joe mentioned, we're testing the concrete, testing the steel, making sure they're up to specifications, and including requiring performance bonds so that they don't we do have some sort of responsibility.
Bill, should we appoint a clerk of the works?
Well, that's, I think, something we can discuss. That's a good buck stops here, arrangement, and we haven't discussed this. I think we'll discuss it in the first session.
Tony? Mr. Mayor, with all due respect to my fellow colleagues, I think you've blown some of this a little bit out of proportion here. You know, this is in addition to a complex. You have an engineer and architect who, by state statute, are 100% responsible for the project. We hire a construction manager, we hire a construction firm to do the construction. They are responsible, along with the engineer and the architect. Our building department, along with the construction official, will only inspect what's being built according to the plans. They are not responsible for any problems with the building. If something gets amiss, they are just inspecting what they can see on the drawing. They're not the stopgap of any problems. So I want to make sure that we are aware of that. So what I hear is a little frightening. And you may think that the building department is responsible. No, they're not. It's the architect and engineer who designed the building the buck stops with them. If the project is handled in an efficient manner with the project manager, with the construction manager, and the contractor, shouldn't have any problem. This is just like this happens all over the United States of America. This is not rocket science.
Well, in fact, Tony, with all due respect, I share Michael's concern only because of our recent past history and our strong desire to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And, I know what you're saying, and it works that way, and it should work that way, but 15 years ago, it didn't work that way here. And, even if you have legal recourse, it costs a lot of money, and a lot of time, a lot of aggravation, and sometimes it never gets right anyway. So, you want to do it right the first time. And I don't think the question is out of order, but you're right also. It shouldn't come down to that. You're absolutely right.
But Tony, you mentioned the project manager. We don't have a project manager, and that was my initial question. Who's going to manage this project? And I guess we will discuss that in a work session with the Clerk of the Works.
I think once again, when that discussion takes place, we need our engineer, perhaps our architect, and our construction official to give us their advice as to how they feel we can best succeed with this project. They're the ones that have the experience. If there's no other anything from the table, I'd like to open this now to the public. I'm going to tell you exactly how it's going to work. We'll ask that you come up to the microphone when you're recognized, and please raise your hand to be recognized. State your name and address for the record. Not only are we recording tonight by audio, but by video. So we want everything to run right. You'll have approximately 3 minutes. You can use that time to voice your concerns. If you're going to ask questions, please direct them to me, and I will direct them to the correct professional. At the end of 3 minutes, or your time is up, I'll ask you to sit down. When everybody's spoken once, those that want to speak again will have that opportunity. This section of the program will end no later than 9:45, so that we have time to conclude our deliberations for tonight. Anybody care to speak? Please.
Mark Zimmer, 37 Hamilton Place, Tenafly. I had the opportunity to tour the police station recently. I agree with the chief's comments. The facility clearly, the officers there clearly need a better environment to work with. They're professionals and they deserve that, there's no question about it. Someone mentioned that, used the word global or the grand scheme here. And as this building is kind of planned for the next 20 or 25 years, part of my, I have a question of the council. Have you considered in terms of the grand scheme, sharing services with other towns, whether it's processing prisoners or things like that? Has anyone considered, are there cost savings to be gained, benefits to be gained by sharing those sort of things with other towns in our area that over the long term, the grand scheme of things may help to reduce costs or save money over time?
Well, I'll start with the answer, and then I'll ask if anybody wants to add or correct what I'm saying. We are in the process of considering all types of shared services. We're not closing our mind to anything. That aside, the concept of sharing the police services has not really been broached in any sort of manner up to this point. I know recently there was something passed along about the sheriff's department taking over certain functions. Once again, I think the initial response to that was the sheriff's department in this particular area is not set up to handle some of the duties that were mentioned in this particular article. I don't think anybody at this table wants to close their eyes to anything. But the number one thing for when it comes to the police is public safety, and we would have to be assured that whatever we enter into would enhance that as well as provide cost savings. We're not going to look to save money at the expense of safety. Anybody care to add?
Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to add that when it comes to sharing services, there are really two sides of it. Part of it is saving money, and part of it, the opposite side, is also earning revenue. in order to be a real partner in sharing services, it's not just a matter of always being the party that has the hat in hand. You also have to be able to offer something. And I can assure you right now that no one would want to share our services within our police department as they currently exist. I don't know if the chief would like to comment on that further.
Well, the only comment I would make is, you throw out a specific of maybe we could share the services of processing prisoners. And that's obviously a statement that's made with having no knowledge how prisoner processing works, and that's not a knock on you, sir. I wouldn't expect you to know. But it is almost impossible to say that we could arrest someone and then have Cresskill process them for us. We have our own investigations that run with arrest, processing being part of it, fingerprinting and processing that's done by our detectives internally is done through a scan machine that's electronic and specific to our New Jersey ORI number, which identifies our agency as the processing agency. And it's covered by a whole host of prosecutors' guidelines, attorney general guidelines. I can't just determine that because I want to have one less cop on the road today, I'm going to encroach on Cresskill or Alpine to process my prisoners. The flip side of that is that then we would be tasked with processing prisoners for some of our adjacent jurisdictions, which I may not have the staffing levels to take care of. One of the things that I brought up at a recent police commission meeting was that the city of Manglewood was wrestling with the idea of laying off 13 police officers. And I asked the chief from that jurisdiction, and I asked our police commissioner to please speak and consider what the ramifications of that would be on us. Because if they did not have the appropriate staffing levels to cover any criminal activity or things that are going on in that city through the mutual aid plan, we would be responding there. And it would not be fair. We do respond for mutual aid to all contiguous jurisdictions by law, but it wouldn't be fair to expect that they can lay off 13 police officers and have Tenafly pick up the lion's share of what they're missing. So while I too believe that shared services have a place, when you talk about municipal police services, you're talking a very specific arena with very specific limitations that you can apply to it. And I'm not so sure that there would be enough savings garnered to make the litigation and problems that go with it worth it. And just to comment on the Sheriff's Department, it's not that they're not set up to do it. It's that the Sheriff's Department consists of corrections officers and sheriff's officers. Corrections officers are not trained as police officers, nor is their core function anything to do with municipal patrol. So it's not a practical thing that they can even consider to take over services. We are different in this area than they are in California or some other areas.
So Mark, two things I'd like to mention. One is, as the chief said, first of all, a lot of federal and state guidelines would have to change to allow that particular situation. But when you talk about shared services, anybody that reads the paper realizes that the police do share services already. When emergencies or contingencies arise, especially at night, there's no individual town that has the manpower to do to handle it. So you'll see an article where there's a problem in Englewood, and TNAC and Tenafly, people are there. And the same thing in Tenafly. There'll be times when we ask for assistance from either Cresskill or Englewood. So even though it's not officially shared services, if we didn't have the opportunity to do that, you'd have to have more manpower. Yes, sir. Please come on.
Gerald, I Road 5, Stony Brook Road. Let me thank you for the opportunity of visiting with you this evening. And I say to the chief, we thank you for your efforts in trying to put this together. But be assured the community is concerned about dollars as well as you are. And hopefully you see the differences of misunderstanding rather than presenting. You use that term several times, and I find it to be very unpleasant from a police official especially. That said, my question would be, when the proposal was made for 12,000 square feet, or whatever that number happens to be, was there a comprehensive comparable analysis made with other communities? Do we know that? or are we just saying this is what we think we need, rather than set it out and find out what other communities are doing? That'd be my first question. My second point is, for a two-story structure, I think it would kind of destroy the symmetry of the municipal complex. And then do we want the police department to be the image of Tenafly? I, personally speaking, I would not do that.
Well, you know that the proposed plan now is one-story project.
Well, I'm hearing two different subjects.
No, the original standalone building was 2 stories.
Okay.
The renovation and addition that's on the table tonight is 1 story.
Thank you. Thank you for that, sir. The other point is, customarily, when you're setting forth an undertaking of this sort, you'll have schematics prepared by the architect, the proposals, maybe 2 or 3 different proposals. In this case, reading the architect's contract, he prepared documents. The community never really had a chance to review options. And this project is being promoted as improvements or expansion of the police department. And tonight, I learned for the first time, half the spaces can be for the municipal complex. Is that right?
No. There's going to be a 9,000 square foot, approximately 9,000 square foot addition out in front. A renovation of 5,000 square feet. A space they are using now will be renovated. And approximately 2,000 square feet that they're now using will not be renovated. That will be returned to Borough Hall for future use.
Okay. Moving on.
So the footprint of the building basically is increasing by 9,000 square feet.
Okay. Moving on, the community got by with 28 police officers. We're now, police department 28. We're now at 42. We had, I think, 7,000 square feet of existing. Is that correct?
Well, you came late, but what the chief said is today, correct me if I'm wrong. Today, we currently have 36 officers, down from 37, there's one child. When he started 25 years ago, we had 35 officers. So in the last 25 years, we have an increase of what?
Well, I seem to recollect different numbers in the chief, and I'll stand by that, But in either case, it further proves the point. If you had 35 then, you have 35 now. How did we ever get by all these years with so little space? And now we're asking for an increase of more than double the space that they've been using all these years. That's a big question mark, and that's why I come back to the point where we should do a comparable analysis of other communities to see exactly what they're doing, how they're getting by. Maybe we'll need more. I'm not sure. But I think a thorough study should be made before we go forward with an expenditure. My last point being, if the bids come in under budget or under what you anticipate, will you freeze those funds and return them to retired debt rather than spend it for other needs in the municipal complex?
Well, once again, I can't speak for the governing body, or we don't even know who will be on the governing body at that time where we're going, but that certainly would be one of the options to consider, is retiring debt or you can surplus or something.
You can make that a stipulation right now.
We can make it a stipulation, but
no, I mean,
that would not preclude future governing bodies from changing their mind. I would like to, you can sit down, but I'd like the chief just to answer your first question, which is, how we arrived at the size of the building, and did we do any comparisons with other communities?
Well, I explained in very detailed fashion how we arrived at the size of the building. But to give you a comparison with other communities, a couple of years after we started planning this project, the Old Japan Police Department moved and built a new headquarters. They currently have about 13,000 square feet of space. It's a 2-story building. They have all the areas and things that we're looking for, and they have 13 men. The Southbrook Police Department, subsequent to our starting the planning, went through and built the police headquarters, and they have 22,000 square feet of space. I believe that's what the number is, and they have 35 men. So I don't know what a comparative analysis would show, because we're governed by a certain amount of square footage based on our needs. And the cell blocks have to be certain sizes, and the salad court has to be certain sizes. Offices are offices. I don't know what kind of a comparative study you're going to get. I know some of my contemporaries in other towns have offices that have a conference table in it. They have their own bathroom and their own. I'm looking for a square office with a desk and a place to work and some file cabinets. So I believe that I was very sensitive to the cost issue because I'm a Tenafly taxpayer too. And as far as your question about we had 35 people then, we have 35 people now, and how do we do with 7,200 square feet of space? The number of people hasn't changed, but our job descriptions, duties, and volumes have. And I can give you just an idea. I'll give you like 1991, we had about 11,000 calls. We had 2 domestic violence incidents. We made about 95 arrests. In 2009, we had close to 15,000 calls. We made 251 arrests. We had 106 domestic violence incidents. We handled average about 450 accidents a year. We're almost at 290 to this point of this year. The amount of summonses that we issue has gone from under 1,000 in 91 to almost 6,000 in 2009. The officers are busy, the call volume is heavier, and now we have to add, because of the building space, there's been a host of mandates in just the course of my career. Years ago, we used to bring people in, we'd process them sitting at a desk, and we'd send them either to jail or whatever. Now we have to, by law, we have to have a separate interview room, there has to be recording capability. We have to have a separate area just to interview juveniles. We have to have a family area when we deal with domestics and things like that, so that people are not getting the feeling that they're being imprisoned. I have to have separate rooms for all of these things to be done. The breathalyzer machine went to the wayside, and we have an Alcatest machine now. It has to have its own secure environment where we have to continue to measure the air around it. Because if you use mouthwash in the locker room and walk in there, you can upset the balance of that machine. So it is a very different world, as I said in my opening presentation, than it was 50 years ago when our building was built. And just all of the mandates and responsibilities and activities that we do, and the things that my officers are required to do, and in terms of the equipment that we now carry, and the standards that we have to have, and all of the devices that we use, you wouldn't recognize the police department. Somebody that worked in our police department their whole career and retired back then would not have a clue as to what they're looking at in our agency right now. So I didn't base this on looking for, let's have a grand space. I tried to get the minimum of what we need in all these areas and try to make it work.
I wanted to ask the architect. Your firm has been involved with other police stations as well, correct?
Yes,
So that experience was brought forward
of course.
Some of that in here?
Yes, and again, every case is an individual case, but there are certain things, like the chief said, that we are required to do. When you upgrade your facilities, we go to the state, we sit down with them, and like the chief said, we need the separate interview rooms, we need all these items, and they review them thoroughly, and, if there's not the minimum dimensions on those spaces, then we have to increase the size of that. And on top of that, which hasn't really been mentioned, are the ADA compliances that, don't have to do with police functions, but that affects every part of the planning. Every toilet, every door needs a proper clearance for the pull and push side, and these things, also have a ripple effect on the side of the building.
These are all state or federal mandates, not. I'm sorry.
So it is an ADA compliant construction job?
Yes.
Please.
Premise called Pulis 164 East Clinton Avenue. First, I'm going to answer a comment that one of the council people made, that the concern of overruns is overblown. It's anything but overblown. I congratulate the people who brought it up, and I'm a little critical of the person who commented on it, because anybody who's been involved in construction knows that that is a very important item, and usually, most of the time, it goes out of control until you have a good watchdog, an experienced watchdog, not one who talks off the top of his head. I was also concerned about the comment that the administrator made that who would want to work with our police department. That's a very bad commentary about our police department, that all these years we hear how good it is. So I hope it wasn't meant to sound the way it sounded in my
You're
ears.
misquoting me. I didn't say who would want to work.
Well, no, those are not the exact words.
I said, and let's keep it in context, we were talking specifically about shared services. And I indicated that given the requirements for police departments in the present time, we cannot offer what a fellow or neighboring police department would need in order to process.
Okay, so you didn't mean what I said, fine.
His remarks was referring to the facility, not the event.
Correct.
Well,
Lots of people will work.
by the way, I have a friend in high places in New York City in the police department, and because of that, I'm not trying to impress anybody by saying that. I visited a couple of stations. Frankly, they make ours, in spite of all the problems, which I assume are true, make like a little palace. I have seen some really crummy stations in New York City. I mean, I was embarrassed myself to get into them, and their bathroom was atrocious. Anyway, to the subject, I think the process for this project was mismanaged from the beginning. The way a project like this goes, and incidentally, I speak both as a taxpayer and a 20-year resident and a professional engineer of more than 40 years of experience. The way one goes about a project like that, first they assess the need, then they quantify the need, then they make a few conceptual drawings, cheap conceptual drawings, not detailed construction drawings for which one spends $1 million. An architect will do all the drawings you want, and you can throw them away. In the meantime, he got paid for it. And the $1 million that the chief made shocked me. Probably it's a true number. I knew you spent a lot of money on it, but not $1 million. That's 20% of the total that was supposed to be spent on the whole project. I also think that having the borough project engineer being the engineer in this project is a conflict of interest, and I'm requesting our council to look into that. Because there's many aspects of it that I see would be a major conflict of interest. The bigger the project, the more the project engineer charges, the borough engineer charges against the borough. Therefore, that immediately becomes a conflict of interest. The easiest way to me to address the obvious need that the chief mentioned, notwithstanding the fact that the numbers of people have not changed over the years, but the needs do. I worked in offices where pretty soon you expand to take the room available, no matter how big the office is. That's human nature. This happened to me. I'm a single person in an almost 3,000 square foot home. And guess what? I moved from an apartment that was 1/4 of that size. I was very comfortable in my apartment in New York City. Guess what? I'm uncomfortable in this house now because I filled it up with all kinds of junk and papers that I should have thrown away a long time ago. But every time I look at them, I figure there'll be a need someday. I think to address the actual needs of our police department, which should be addressed, a 2,000 square foot addition should suffice. It could be built adjacent to the building on the south side of the, on the north side of the present structure without in any way disturbing the police department. Forget trailers and the cost and removing people again and upsetting the operation. Then when those 2,000 square feet are finished, to the life of the chief, of course, and his staff, then knock a couple holes in the wall, put the proper doors, the proper safeguards, and there you are. You have the bigger police station. You can do that for less than $1 million. And how did I come up with this number? 2,000 square feet at 200, which is generous, in spite of numbers that I've seen in the books to the contrary. And in that respect, I think maybe the town is not being served well with some of the estimates that was given. At $200 a square foot, 2,000 would be $400,000. Another $100,000 for contingency, and another $500,000 for additional communications, which I'm sure are needed, for renovation. the way it's shown on the drawings, and I studied the drawings the other day, those detailed drawings that should have been detailed at this stage of the game, those drawings show that instead of renovation, we're talking demolition and reconstruction. Renovation to me means painting, changing the floor, knocking a wall down, that sort of thing. Not knocking the whole building and rebuilding it, that's not renovation. Last but not least, unless this project, no matter what its size, it's controlled by a single czar, a single, call him project manager, call him whatever you wish, it will overrun, I guarantee it. Architects and engineers have a propensity of billing it to death. I was one of them. Billing it to death, but I worked with utilities. I didn't work with small communities like that. Billing it to death for every scope change. If the police chief came tomorrow and he said, oh, you know, now that I look at it, I need the door, I wouldn't dare tell you how much they're going to charge you. Thank you.
We're not going to ask you to be the clerk of the works after that.
I will not take the job if offered, but if I were the project manager, first of all, I would get rid of the present project engineer. Because mistakes are all over town.
I just would like to say, to respond to you, that your suggestion of how the project should progress, you'd be surprised to know that our project has progressed in many ways similar to what you discussed. But when you get up here and you say, I believe it should be a 2,000 square foot addition, I'm wondering if you did the same process to arrive at that. I'd like to ask the borough attorney just to discuss your sense that the borough engineer might be in conflict.
No, I think that's, when Mr. Galtides goes to law school and gets his law degree, you can comment on legal issues, but Mr. Galtides, that's not a conflict at that point. Maybe you may consider it for purposes of engineering, but that's one of the functions of the
Allow me one question to your
Well, one of the functions, one of the reasons that a municipality has for our engineer.
Okay, next.
May I ask one question?
You know what, there's a gentleman that hasn't spoken. If you get another turn, I'm sure we'll have a second go around.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did anybody else want to add to any comments?
David
Hold on,
says,
Dave, just 1 second. Sorry.
I just would like to respond here, back up on this area. And it is the engineer and architect that is ultimately responsible for the project. The construction manager is ultimately responsible for the project. If an oversight of the building department. And it was not misquoted, that is the facts, that's state law. So, thank you.
Yeah, David Simpson, 12 Woodland Park Drive. I don't begrudge the chief his presentation. He has a constituency. It's not himself, it's his force. But what I am disturbed about, frankly, is that the council is doing nothing better than nibbling around the edges about something of this seriousness. I quoted General Eisenhower the last time I spoke, and I said Eisenhower, who kept this country safe during the darkest days of the Cold War and the most dangerous times, said, God help the American people when I'm not here to resist the demands of the generals for weaponry and for forces. And that's always got to be kept in mind when a body such as yourself is hearing from a particular constituency. And in fact, right now today in this country, we are facing the need to cut defense spending because we are going broke. Now, I think that what surprises me so much is that this conversation is taking place with no recognition of the backdrop that's existing today. I did a calculation, and I'm assuming that there are 3,000 homes, individual homes in Tenafly. Yes? 5,000. Oh, makes my point. And assuming that the average home price was around a little over $600,000, and that represents a drop of 25% from the high. There's been $1 billion of loss of wealth in this town, and yet you are going ahead as though none of this happened. Now, I wonder whether you read the paper today and you saw what the governor is proposing to do with respect to Xanadu and the Atlantic City mess and the racetrack mess. He's proposing to take this apart bodily and not to sort of stay with things as they are. And I don't hear any sense on the part of anybody on this council, even those who I would like to feel were more aggressive about this, that we can continue to do business as usual. Because we can't. And what might have been a nice idea 5 years ago, when we were in this upward sense of wealth in this country, that's all gone now. And I think it's incumbent upon you to re-examine this entire project. Now, one of the questions that's been asked by other people, but I think it's a very important question, is overall, how many square feet do police officers need to operate? Is it 315 or 330? Is it 250? The chief gave some anecdotal information about 2 other towns. But I don't know that that's not an adequate answer to a question like that. And that's a very legitimate question. And that's a question that should have been asked at the very beginning of this discussion about a new police station. Not now. We should have said, you've got so many police, let's see these additional functions, but what does the average police officer working? I've been in some New York police stations too. My wife is a matrimonial lawyer. She's had a number of domestic relations complaints, and I've gone to these stations with her. And believe me, there's nothing remotely palatial about them. They live in very straitened circumstances, but they do their work, and frankly, they do their work at a fraction of the salaries that are being paid here. And to anybody who says that people will not come to work for the Tenafly Police Department, where there's an average salary of $136,000, I tell you, there's $1,000 of my money on the line right now that you're going to be proved wrong. Now, the last thing I want to say is, if you're going to go ahead with this, and I am afraid that you are, because I don't sense any sense of urgency, real urgency about our financial circumstances and about the country's circumstances on the part of this council. One thing that you must see to is that there are no change orders, because change orders are the absolute fruit of overruns in any project. And with respect to the budget engineer, the borough engineer, I don't know if he's got a conflict of interest, but my question is, does he have the capacity? Does he have the professional expertise? A man who's normally dealing with, this little thing in a house or that little setback. Does he have the capacity to manage a $5 million budget when we know how much, not just this borough hall, we know how notorious things have been in the state of New Jersey in terms of cost overruns for virtually everything that's been built. We had a school construction authority that was created that ran out of money, a little more than halfway having built what it was supposed to build. This is not a joke. We are standing on the edge of a precipice here. Thank you.
So our needs are different than a New York City precinct. And I too have people that I know in very high places in NYPD, but I've been an officer for 25 years, and I've seen our needs grow, and I've seen our capabilities grow, and I know the bang that this town gets for its buck from this police department. And, the other thing that we worry about, that some larger cities don't worry about, is we're a service agency. We don't just respond to 911 calls because they're stacked on the roof. We respond to some of the most minor, mundane things, but have to handle them, and it takes time, and we have to do it with a sense of sensitivity. We have to do it with the realization that that's why we're here. So it's kind of unfair to compare us to an NYPD precinct that's a dump, and it's just a lack of knowledge of the workings of a police department to think that we can say a single officer requires X number of square feet to function. It's just a ludicrous way to look at it based on the way that we function.
Anybody else care to comment? Somebody else, please.
Bill Lukens, 33 Stony Brook. The board will know me. I've been to meetings for 30 months. I went to meetings until I finally got totally disgusted. And I didn't want to sit and just waste my time listening to this council. I left the last meeting when DiGiacomo left. He should have been gone a few years before.
Sir,
But,
excuse me.
I have the microphone. It's my time. It's my time. It's my time.
Excuse me, your mission here is to
My
discuss
mission
the
here
project
is to express my feelings
about the police expansion.
about the town, the council, and the construction of the police department. And you don't interrupt me or put spin on my conversation.
I'm not trying to put spin on
Okay,
the conversation.
enough. Give me my time. Give me my time.
But I don't think you should attack people in Borough Hall, either present or past.
The point that I'm trying to bring down is the council has been working very hard. And when this thing first came up, the first thing we approved was a bond issue. Remember that $5 million bond? Whatever happened to that money? The $5 million to build a police station? Am I missing something?
Are you finished?
No, I'm serious.
We'll answer your questions.
No. We appropriated I believe it was $5 million. Because I got up at that particular meeting and I said, I think we shouldn't appropriate any money at this particular time because the conditions are going to get much, much better to get money. It's on the record and you can check it. The first thing we rushed to do was to get that bond money. It's $5 million. We've been paying interest on that for 5 years. This police station, guaranteed, is probably undersized. But there's more important things to do and look forward to the future. As this gentleman brought to your attention, this police station isn't going to be a freestanding body forever. We can't afford it. The next contract's going to come up, you won't be able to fund the police department. You won't be able to fund the fire departments. You're running a business. You gotta think of it as a profit center. We can't run any more debt. And when you want to build a building, you better make sure you can pay for it without going to the taxpayers to foot the bill. That's all I have to say.
Anybody else care to speak? Please.
Gotti Reinhold, 20 Hillcrest Road in Tenafly.
Just speak into the mic.
Yeah, Gotti Reinhold, 20 Hillcrest Road in Tenafly. First of all, I think that the chief made a really great presentation, and I think it's very well spoken. I think he does an excellent job. And I truly believe that this town needs the space that the chief is requiring. And, I'm sure that everybody has done a really great job with this. I do think, though, that the town has to consider somewhat the present economy and the cost to the taxpayers, and has to understand that people aren't necessarily making what they used to make. Interest rates, people aren't getting what they used to get. So somehow the money has to come from somewhere. The state, I think, is really starting now to really do a big job on starting to cut costs. I think our taxes are going up way too high. I do think that something needs to be done, but I think that, and I hope that the council really looks at these numbers and really, thinks this over again. And maybe if something was $5 million, if it winds up being $4 million, something could be done. Thank you very much.
Anybody else care to speak? You need to take that out.
Mark Sullivan, 133 Lyle Drive. What disturbs me about this evening's proceeding is that it seems like we're being offered an all or nothing proposition, which really shouldn't be the case. Admittedly, there's a plan on the table, and some of us have had more chance than others to go into the details of it, and it comes highly recommended by our professionals. But I'm wondering why, given the state of the economy that's been referred to by many people repeatedly in council meetings for the entire 2 years I've been involved in this process, that there is a limit to how much the taxpayers of Tenafly can afford at any particular time, and the recession does affect that. Therefore, if the public is saying that at this point in time they don't really want to spend $4.8 million, it seems to me it behooves the council to go back over the proposal, not to say to the police, no, you can't have anything, because it's shameful that we haven't acted for the 10 or more years that they've been waiting for us to do something. And I'm one of the people who's been in the police station and knows that their situation is inadequate. So there does need to be something done about it urgently. However, to jump from 7,200 square feet now to a proposal for 15,000 square feet, which is 2.1 times the existing space, may or may not be justified. And I know the police have requested this, they've presented justifications to you, but I would point out to you, Mayor, that the police commission meetings are not open to the public, so we have not been able to hear the arguments, the presentations that the police chief has made repeatedly, and none of that material has been brought from the police commission over time to the council for them to get into the details, and therefore there's a certain amount of skepticism out there as to whether 15,000 square feet is the right number. Now, I'm not going to say what the right number is, but I am prepared to say that I don't think $4.8 million is an amount that the public of Tenafly wants to pay. So if that's the case, we have to go back over two things, not three things. We're not here to say nothing gets done. Absolutely not. That would be absolutely wrong. But let's go back and say, how many square feet do we absolutely need, and what is the best cost per square foot we can get under today's economic circumstances, and then make the decision whether the resulting number, whether it's 3 million or 3.5 or 4 million, is the right number to go forward. And I don't hear that happen. I hear people raising questions about, do we really need this? Why is it so expensive? But I don't think the members of our elected council are really dealing with the issue as the public feels it right now. Thank you.
I just would like to say, Mark, that things that were discussed or presented to the police commission were brought forward, the plans were brought forward to the governing body. I think the purpose of the police commission is to bring it forward. The only thing that stays in the police commission, more or less, is confidential stuff.
You said, and I think incorrectly, that every detail of this has been aired in public. And you know how religiously I come to meetings, and I've been listening and I've been asking. And I remember last fall when we transferred the money from the standalone building to the new proposal, it was not at all voted on or not at all clarified what the new arrangement was going to cost. And in February, when the architects presented the exterior scheme of this at a public meeting that I attended, there was no dollar amount attached to it at that time, and none of the details that we now have to look at in terms of the rooms and what their uses were and the square footage were available. So I disagree with you that since we decided to go the renovation route, that there's been a clear discussion of money and square footage, and there should have been. And that's not the police chief's fault. I'm sure he provided all of that to you. It's the way we go about the governing process here in Tenafly.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one comment for Mr. Feldman. The one thing that you said that is completely inaccurate is that everything was kept at the police commission level and no presentation of need was made to the public. As I said in my initial presentation, I proposed the need to the police commission, and the first thing they asked me to do was make a presentation at a public council meeting, which I did. And since this started in 2003, I've attended several council meetings at their request to justify the need, to explain the details of what we needed. So perhaps you weren't
I
aware of it.
wasn't referring to 2004.
No, over the years. I'm talking about in that time frame since. I have indeed made many presentations in public council meetings. They were very cautious, to their defense, that when I brought this up to them, they stopped and said, okay, get a proposal together and bring it to a full council meeting so that we can air this publicly, and that's what was done. So you're inaccurate when you say it was only handled at police commission meetings. That's not.
When was the last such presentation, Chief?
I don't have a date off the top of my head, but I definitely.
Mark, please.
Just one comment. I seem to remember the last meeting we had where we did present this in the small room next to the council, that at the end of that meeting, there was a question, and I believe you even raised it as far as falling within the previous budget and the bonding, and that it was always the understanding that it was going to be within that range of the bonding. So that wasn't a public meeting.
Anybody who has not spoken there, in the back, please?
Robert Fuller, 300 River Edge Road. I take it you're going to bond this?
It's been bonded.
Then already you're using the money from the bond that we had issued 4 years ago, or whatever it was.
If we were going to move forward, that's where the money would come from.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Anybody who has not, please.
Bill Kelly, 24 Goodwood Road. As a former 12-year member of the planning board, I learned what frustration was very early on. And I'm sure other members of the board felt the same way. But it goes with the territory. So you just keep your mouth shut and much along, do what you think is right. In any event, I see frustration here on a lot of faces here. I certainly don't want to add to it. However, I have a couple of questions. My wife and I stopped by Monday to look at the plans. First time we've seen any of this juncture. And a couple of things struck me. A weight room, for instance. We have a 775-foot plan for a weight room. Is that necessary? I mean, is that mandated by the state? Why are we providing that kind of facility when we could send these guys down to Verizon, not Verizon, but to Oxygen, and have their exercise problems taken care of down at Oxygen? I noticed also that we have a training room and a conference room side by side. I don't know what goes on in the training room. I assume the conference room is a conference table. And, a lot of people sit around the table as we do in the Dick Wilson room next door. I don't know why those two rooms can't be combined. The functions of those rooms can't be combined, so that you have one room serving two purposes. Happens a lot of places, and it works well. The chief mentioned that all of the officers are armed. And in that case, I wonder why we need a weapons storage room. I don't know what kind of weapons we're storing. I don't know what war we're planning for, but
how much storage do we need for weapons other than what the guys already have, pistols, blocks, I assume? Maybe a couple of assault weapons, but I don't think very much more than that. Since I haven't seen or heard what the requirements have been, I really don't know. But I think there's a certain amount of overkill in all of this. And I think there are areas where things can be cut back. In the locker rooms, for instance, the men's locker room, I noticed there is 41 men's lockers proposed and 5 women. And we have, what, 36 members of the force now? We're thinking of adding 10 more. 41 men and 5 women for a total of 46. That seems like overkill. You know, I agree. In most cases, most areas, you need to expand what we have. We are marginally effective with the amount of space that we have. We have to add to that space, but I wonder if the space that is proposed in the plans is not a lot more than we really do. Thank you.
Yeah, I can actually respond to all of your questions, Mr. Kelly. The weight room, the thing that you're asking is why does the taxpayers have to bear the cost of a weight room? Can we send the officers to oxygen? We already have a weight room, and every piece of equipment in it was paid for by the police officers. It was not funded by the borough. And all we're looking to do is add a little bit of footage onto that weight room so we can expand the space for some of the equipment that we already have. There was no purchase included for the cost of weight equipment. The officers paid for it ourselves, and I don't know about you, but I want my cops in shape when they're out there doing their job. You asked about a conference room and a training room. How come they can't be dual use? The conference room has been designed to be set up as an emergency management center as well. When we have a large-scale incident, when we do anything that takes place that we need to have command outside of our desk area, we set up an alternate command place. So I have this conference room designed that it can automatically be turned into an emergency management center. For example, when we had the severe storms, when we had the triple homicide, when we've had other things where I require outside jurisdictions to come in for an extended period. So the conference room is a dual-use room. I'm already ahead of you on that. We didn't build in a separate command center. You asked about the training room. We are required by the federal and state mandates and the Attorney General's guidelines to qualify and certify our officers in literally dozens of certifications and standards that they have to meet. Rather than put it in my budget and send them out to expensive training courses, when I became chief, I started sending officers to instructor schools so that I can do all that training in-house. So I do all of our domestic violence training, all of the mandated training that we have to do for arrest, search, and seizure, the things that I need to do to every year report to the Attorney General and the prosecutor that we've met. I do it in-house at no cost to the borough, rather than send them out with an extravagant education and training budget line item. What we charge for is textbooks. That's it. All my officers are certified instructors. Right now, we're beginning a whole host of training for advanced first responders so that they have an advanced medical knowledge when they go to your home for a medical emergency, heaven forbid. So it's, again, a purposeful room because it's saving the borough thousands and thousands of dollars in training costs that other agencies spend because I chose to take my guys have to be instructor certified and we do it all in-house. Very few agencies do that. You asked about weapons. Are we storing a stockpile of weapons that we need a room that large? Well, you're a little off on what we do have and carry, but with weapons come ammunition. And we also carry chemical weapons, and we also have to have armorers' tools, and we have to have a place for them to work on those things. So this room encompasses storage, workroom ability for my armorers. I don't send our weapons out when they need to be maintained or fixed. I have certified armorers within the agency for every weapon that we carry. And we do have some weapons beyond a few handguns and an assault rifle. In today's world, we know what we need, and we have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. None of that is stuff that we're buying additionally. It's all armament that we have. If you knew the amount of ammunition that we're required to go through by law between mandated qualifications and then mandated training, you would know that I could fill this table with cases of ammunition and not get through the year. So it's necessary storage space. And I understand you're questioning it because you don't know, but this was all covered time and time again in our planning process. And as far as the 41 men's lockers and 5 women's lockers, right now we have several female employees who need locker space. And no, I'm not planning to get 10 police officers. I'm praying I can keep what I have. But we do have officers that have additional lockers to their standard locker because all the members of the Honor Guard have separate equipment and uniforms that they store. All the members of our tactical team have separate equipment and uniforms that they store. The locker room that we have now, when the officers change, they have their street clothes and things like that in there, and they store their weapons in there when they're off duty. But some of them do have secondary lockers because of secondary assignments and things like that. So I'm not planning to add any officers. The council will tell you I haven't made a proposal to increase the size of our department. The staffing is adequate. I don't see any change, but we did feel the need to put in the additional lockers because it serves dual purpose. It gives the officers the ability to have secondary lockers when they need them now. And if the complexion of Tenafly changes 20 years from now, long after I'm out of here, and they determine that they need additional officers, you won't be strapped for space. So I really, when I tell you I went through this for years with the utmost sensitivity to cost, I'm a taxpayer too. Anything that I do that increases taxes the taxes at my house as well. I went through this to try to be as cost effective as possible because in dealing with the governing body, I know that when I make a proposal to them and they buy into it, they have to answer to you. And what I try to do is give them all the ammunition necessary to say, here's why we're doing it, here's what we're doing, and here are the options that we pursue. So I'm not an architect, an engineer, or a project manager. I'm just a cop for 25 years. I'd like to think I know what I'm doing, and I would like to think that anyone who knows me can say that I've always put the betterment of Tenafly before anything regarding the needs of my own constituency as they go. So I hope that answers your question.
Anybody who has not spoken yet that would like to speak, please?
Steve Savis, 40 South Park Drive. I've been listening to comments here that have been integrated, I've been hearing them, trying to put them all together to what we might learn from this and where we might go from here. This is the first major construction project in Borough in 15 years. That was a disaster in the ways that have been identified before. But it seems to be in 15 years, things change. And so one would have thought the first thing to do would be some sort of space inventory, find out what did we have then, what do we have now, how's it being used now, and are there better ways, given the current circumstances, given what we have now, can the current space be reallocated in better and different ways? That apparently was not done. Then we also heard that there was not a needs assessment in the classical kind of sense. Again, beginning from the space inventory, finding out in detail what exactly is needed. We've heard examples from several different police facilities in Bergen County. And so a legitimate question was asked, and I think the mayor gave it the answer a short shrift. We said, well, you look thoroughly at it. The question was, what is the average usage of police, what is the average number of square feet for a police officer in a good, modern, well-run facility here in Bergen County? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the number should be. I believe in Old Japan it sounded like about 1,000 square feet per officer. I'm not sure. Around here it seems about 410 square feet. I don't know if 410 square feet is too little, too much, just right, or whatever. But I'm concerned that nobody here knows the answer to that question. So I think it's process is what I'm focusing on over here. And then the next thing we did, or maybe the first thing, was issue a bond for $5 million. Again, that seems kind of premature before you know what you're building and what you're going to do with it. The process itself, as we heard also from an experienced engineer here, the first process is to go through several different conceptual, low-cost conceptual alternative schemes, alternative plans to do something. Apparently that wasn't done. Instead, went straight through to a highly detailed kind of plan at rather high cost. additional issues that have come up is how we're going to manage the process. And there seems to be some question, there's a lot of finger pointing at who's what's who. I'm not qualified to judge that. And one issue was raised as well. The economic circumstances now are different from what they were anticipated to be 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 6 years ago. So the process has been faulty. I'm not sure what you, the Borough Council, will learn from that. But these questions are all legitimate questions. I think the process has been faulty in the ways I've just indicated. Thank you.
No, it's a very interesting question. What has the council learned from this? Because the implication is whatever the council, this council, has learned from this process, it will be a learning to be incorporated into the future councils. And in my experience, that has not been the case as a councilman. And the reason why I have that view is because, and this is really, has nothing to do with the police headquarters. This has to do with councils, process, learning, and the lack of learning.
In this particular case, for example, our professionals quite often outlast our elected officials. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I always look to our professionals. I looked for a long time to Mr. DiGiacomo, who was here for 12 years, a lot longer than I look to our CFO, I look to our borough clerk, who's been here over 20 years, and we're losing a lot. But on the other hand, when we gain new people, we gain a new perspective, a new sense of life experience. But there's no replacing the old. And that's one of the reasons why we keep minutes. And hopefully the minutes can sometimes supplement what we forget, but not always. And that would require us going back and listening to the minutes. But as something that Mr. Barzalano said earlier, each project stands on its own, and we have to move forward with people that we have to work with. Our administrator, our engineer, if they weren't involved in the previous projects, hopefully their knowledge of what they were doing at that time somewhere else will benefit us. It is our responsibility, 7 of us, whoever that 7 is in time, to make sure that this project succeeds. And if it fails, regardless of whose responsibility it was, if it fails, it lands on our shoulders. And if the project succeeds, we can accept some of the credit for it. So Mike is absolutely right. But the long and short of it is, if we go forward with this project, we accept the responsibility for this project. And I hope that when we decide whether we're going to do it or not, that everybody accepts that responsibility.
Mayor, just to echo one thing the mayor said, the resolution that started this whole ball rolling was made on July 8th, 2003, and it was offered by Councilman Bernstein and seconded by Councilwoman Kirby, neither of whom are currently on the council.
What I just want to say that I have picked up is that we set aside, we spent $5,200 in 2003 for space study and design options. So there was a preliminary study done way back, and then there was also the next option, and I guess there were 5 design options presented, just basically
That's
based on history.
Like the New Jersey Turnpike, the 5 became 5A, 5B, and 3A.
Quite a bit of issue.
We considered a lot of different options, and I don't think it would be fair to say that we have not considered alternatives to these. I think we got a couple of hands up. We have about 5 more minutes for public comment, and we'll take over.
Because it came up a couple of times. I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that the information about the space per officer was asked for by the council. The chief did provide that information to us. It was more than just 2 little examples of that at the time. I don't know if we can get that out of the record, but I know our coaches and officers and that, follow up back on our system on that summarize that. So it was something that was addressed, was pushed on.
Could you please speak up so we can hear you?
Yeah, about a year ago, we did, for sure at that point, get a comparative analysis done. Not maybe an analysis would be too far, but we saw the space per person in the police department compared to other counties, and the chief did produce that for us and lay that out. So that was something that was discussed, just because a number of people have brought it up, and nobody actually said, well, we did actually ask that question, we did get information. I just want you to know, that question was asked, and we did get that information, and Tenafly, the space that we're getting is below any other construction project on that list, I think except one, from, as I recall, the analysis. But it was something that was definitely looked at in this process.
And I just wanted to add that, you know, that may be used as a starting tool, but you should not put too much into that number because there are certain spaces that are required regardless of how many officers you have, and that may be good as a ballpark figure when you start out. But, you know, as we said, we have gone through this extensively, and we are required to do a certain number of things at a certain space requirement. So, you know, that number is going to vary based on the size of your department. So, if to put all your emphasis on that would not really be an accurate portrayal of the project.
Is there anybody here that has not spoken that would like to speak? I'm going to take two more people, no more than 3 minutes each, and then we're going to go into deliberation and discussion. I'm going to hand it first, sir.
Yeah, speak from here.
I would prefer this to come up to the line if it's possible.
Gerald Hyder, 5 Stony Brook Road. To the architect, I would ask, are those figures available that you said that you used for client square footage for the requirements? Are they available to the public?
We submitted them to the council, I'm assuming. Again, it's just a rough ballpark figure, so that was based on the previous projects. And
what we might be able to supply, I can't tell you if we can, the chief would check say yes or no. The areas that are mandated in one manner or another, is there some way we can distinguish that on the plan? Because I think people would be surprised as to how much that.
That would be very helpful.
I'm sorry?
That would be very helpful to know that. I would answer a lot of questions right away. And the other question for the councilwoman, you had mentioned that there were 5 proposals or schemes prepared. Are they available for?
They have to be around somewhere. They're not relevant. They're not relevant for standalone. Maybe really a standalone. And I think, and please, once again, correct me if I'm wrong. I think what happened was, we took the final standalone plan that we approved, and just moved it across the driveway and implemented those plans, that space mixture into the renovation and expansion.
Thank you.
I'm sure that we can dig those plans up, but I'm not sure how much relevance you would find to the last, or you're in the front, or you'll be the last one, and then we'll welcome you to stay.
Pardon me, called Davis 164 is Clinton Avenue. By the way, Chief, I didn't mean that we should emulate the worst stations in New York City in our town. I just put the example that the efficiency of the police department is not necessarily a direct function of the luxuries around it, because after all, New York City has a very good police department, maybe one that has more demands than possibly any other police department in the world, and yet they operate sometimes out of less than luxurious quarters. Also, I know, just by looking and listening to him now, that our police chief is not delirious. But had he been, and had he recommended 100,000 square feet expansion, our borough engineer would have complied without giving solid advice to the town that there are other alternatives. And I'd like to direct a question directly to him now. How many police stations have we worked on, borough engineer?
I asked Arnie that you direct the questions to me.
Okay. I'd like to know how many police stations the borough engineer has worked on. And let me close by saying this. I think this is a very good meeting, held at the wrong time because everybody else is away at this time. in the wrong venue because this room has terrible acoustics, as you all know. Thank you.
I can't justify the room, but I do agree to have our key residents here tonight.
Ma'am, I'd just like to respond to you, Mr. Calatidis. You're 100% right that the efficiency of a police department does not depend on the luxuries around it. And you should know that by the efficiency of your police department, which is one of the most efficient police departments in this county. And we certainly are not that way because of the luxuries that have been around us for the 25 years that I'm here.
Do you think every other police chief thinks the same thing about East Town?
I'd say maybe 50% of them.
Before I ask the borough engineer here to respond, I will tell you from my perspective, I'm not speaking for the other 6 members of the governing body, I think it's more important that our architect has had some experience in designing police stations. As far as the borough engineer's experience, if he's worked on police stations, that's great. I just want somebody, and this goes for the rest of our professionals too, that understands construction, and how to build a building that functions properly, that doesn't have leaks, that the all the systems work properly. I think our engineer is qualified to do that. I'm sure that he is. But I'm going to ask him if he's had any experience. But like I said, speaking for myself, I'm more concerned that he has the experience with buildings, and I believe he's shown that. David, you work on any police stations?
No, this is actually, the Tenafly is the only time I work for a police station, but it's actually irrelevant to my work. None of my work is in the building itself. All of my work is site development. Anything outside the building proper, that's my expertise, and that is what my project or my plans entail, everything outside the building limits. And in terms of that, I've probably done over 1,000 projects associated with some type of building issue.
Okay.
As an engineer, I'll say that's an absolutely erroneous answer.
I'm going to close the public. Ernie, close the public comment section.
I mean, he's by the way,
Ernie, please.
May I make one
No.
comment? You're irrelevant.
I know your feelings on the
But I meant before
borough.
with the overheads. What I meant before with the overheads.
We're running, it's 10, we have to be
But
on.
that's the problem. He tells you anything he wants. You're not engineers, and I don't expect you to be, and you believe it. It's not true what he just said. I'll take it apart anytime.
Answer me nicely, please.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, at this particular point, I'd like to open the discussion. The council president asked if we should read the proposed resolution, and I'm going to suggest that we have discussion first, and then we'll, something that you want to read the resolution. And I'd like to open the floor to the members of the council for comments and concerns. Obviously, we want to professional. Please.
Yeah, the resolution that Ken is going to read is only for the trailer parks. Joe, is that right? The resolution that Ken's going to read is just the trailer component?
No, the resolution that we had is for going out to bid.
Oh, it's for the bids, just bids. Just bids. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Just a thought, I don't know if this would recall or anybody else is thinking, but it's what I'm thinking and I want to share it with you guys. If we go forward with the police expansion, and let's say a year after that, council decides that we're going to enter into a shared services agreement in index of the police department. I guess the way I view an expansion is like giving us some leverage, a better asset with which to negotiate. They're going to offer something, we're going to offer something back and forth and such. So I just wanted to put that out on the table because I don't know that everybody is thinking of it.
I would agree with that, taking into account without mentioning specific names, if you think adjacent communities, I don't think any of them that I can think of have recently modernized or enlarged their facilities. They would be able to deal with shared services any better than we do today. What? Well, yeah, Tina. I'm not sure that would be anybody else? I mean, if nobody else has any comments, we'll make a motion.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. First of all, everybody has agreed that the police department facility is not adequate. And what's interesting, when you get a copy of the report when the police building gets inspected, there's a large number of things where it does not meet current standards, some by fractions of an inch. For example, for less than a foot, cell corridors are too narrow. They're supposed to be 4.5 feet, ours are only 4. Cells are supposed to be 60 square feet, ours are only 50. The cell fronts are not supposed to be barred. They're supposed to be constructed in 6-inch reinforced concrete. They even detail how close the bunks need to be to the door. The rule is no closer than 12 inches, ours are 6. They're supposed to be, the cell doors are supposed to swing out, not in. There's supposed to be a water outlet within a certain distance from the cells so that they can be cleaned. There's very specific recommendations for Sally Port and how you bring prisoners into the building and you're not supposed to bring them into a public area. That, as we've already said, there's no locker room, showers for females. There's no secure and separate prisoner processing room. There's no separate juvenile interview room. The workspaces basically are not OSHA compliant. You can have a situation in a detective room where a detective could be questioning a victim and the perpetrator is getting his mug shot on the other side of the room. And these are just some of the things that we really do need in addition to the police department. We talk about the need. I don't think anybody in 1985 or 1963 realized the volume of traffic that we would have to handle in Tenafly. Try to make a left turn on the Knickerbocker Road 800 during any rush hour. There was a traffic count made, and the chief, correct me if I'm wrong, on East Clinton Avenue, and they counted over 17,000 cars in a 24-hour period. We have an unusually high number of accidents. I'll correct you.
Okay.
It was a 12-hour period, and that was 6 years ago.
Yeah. So it was 17 and 12 hours, not 24. Okay. We have a large number of accidents for a town where the highest speed limit, with one tiny exception, is 40 miles an hour.
I can predate myself a little bit. In the late 70s, I was one of the dispatchers for the Tenafly Police Department. And back then, it was an experience all to itself. It was an interesting place to work. It was a very tight place. Actually, the chief mentioned about a prisoner possibly getting away. I'll never forget the day. One day I was a dispatcher. One detective brought in a prisoner. The prisoner ended up breaking loose because of the way the confines of the police station was, and walked right out of the police station. That cannot happen. Granted, it was a minor infraction that he was brought in for, but still, he was brought in for questioning. I also serve as the emergency management coordinator, and as Mr. Bruno has brought up the concept of having a communication room or a communication center or a command center. It is duly needed in the borough of Tenafly. You may not see, but actually up in the Bergen County in Mawa, they just built a brand new emergency management facility to serve all of the towns in Bergen County as a county-wide. We in Tenafly have to serve the needs of Tenafly. And that by having a room such as that would serve the needs of Tenafly. As the coordinator, it's something that we truly need, because working out of a small little office or standing in the closet, I can just tell you that when we had the last storm, I spent a good part of my evening and days in the police station, and I was in and out of the dispatch room, and it really is not the way to handle things. It's not very professional. As someone who was a rescuer on 9/11, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, and to my fellow colleagues, that today, more than ever, we need an up-to-date police station, an up-to-date police department, the most state-of-the-art, because I promise you, as I sit here, that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that when will happen again. And we are very close in the proximity of the area where the when will happen. And if we're not prepared and we're not ready, God help us all. And I will 100% support this idea of the expansion of the police department, because as someone who has been in Tenafly my whole life and has worked in the police station many, many times, it really needs to be refurbished, and it needs to be expanded for the betterment of the police department, and not just the police department, the betterment of our citizens of Tenafly.
Yeah, I'd like to change the subject from 9/11 murders to bid itself. I want to express a concern that the specifications contained in the RFP are comprehensive, and that there will be no change orders based upon anything that can be put in the planning process. I understand there are surprises when you dig a hole. I'm saying this because with Highland Park, we had two change orders. One was the sprinkler system. The sprinkler system, there's different points of view on whether the sprinkler system is discussed in the planning portion of Highland Park. My recollection is that there was. And the other change order was an afterthought, and the council unanimously agreed with this afterthought, which was to add pavers on the north side of the park, otherwise it would remain cement sidewalk, which would have been in keeping with the pavers that encircle the redone Highland Park. Aesthetically, arguable whether the pavers should have been thought of during the design process. It's not in the design, I guess it can't be in the specs. The sprinklers, the grass doesn't have water, especially when you're laying down the side. That sounds like an unforgivable error. So Highland Park is going to end up costing us, I don't know, $120,000 or $130,000. We expected $15,000 less to that. Scale that up to the police station, and that's a scary thought. So I bring this to the table, and I'm saying this now, to express a concern and to underscore the importance that the specifications that we met in the RFP are comprehensive. Because when it comes time to a change order, I can't see that happening. If that change order is a result of insufficient thinking and planning before the RFP is done.
I just want to, tonight we're talking about going out to bid for the addition and renovation, and that's the logical next step. We've looked at the design, we've heard about the need, the timing is appropriate for the building and the new construction in my opinion, and the need is certainly there, and you know, the next question is just how much it's going to cost. And we can't know that until we go out to bid. We have to go out to bid. We have to find out how much the project costs, and then decide exactly what we can do. So I believe we're ready for the next step. Plus the fact that I think our timing may be very appropriate here. The same problems that we're mentioning locally are certainly affecting the construction industry. We may get very lucky with the bids that are on return. And we may find that it's a very serendipitous time to go out with bids.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to comment Mr. Ladd's concerns. Michael, I think I know where you're coming from, because I don't know if you were on the council when Borough Hall was under that renovation, and they had a lot of problems, I know that for sure. But I think, I can't state it enough that, again, the architect and engineer are ultimately responsible, and if we get a good construction project manager and a good contractor, sure, are there going to be problems, are there going to be change orders? It's called construction, Michael. That's the way life goes in every project, whether it's your house or whether you're building Borough Hall. But I think we have to keep our thumb on the button and make sure that it's being run efficiently. Whether that happened back then, I can't speak for that, but I think times are a little different today from all of our perspectives. What you see?
And I appreciate that, Tony, but I have to say that I don't feel comfortable with what I heard about the management of the project.
Can I ask two quick clarifications? One is, Tony, when you say the engineer is responsible, I'm trying to understand that, and I'm not an expert in this, but I thought I heard Dave say he's really only involved in the site aspects of this. Did I hear that wrong?
No, you heard it correct.
So is there another engineer involved, like maybe for the architect's company that taking on this
No. When
responsibility?
an engineer or architect signs and seals the drawing, they are the ones by New Jersey state statute responsible for the project from the start to the finish. If something goes wrong, they are the ones that are held responsible.
I understand the
Checks and balances of the building department, but yes.
So I understand the drawing aspect of it, I'm just not sure who the engineer is. So, it goes back to the project management question, and I guess I was really comfortable with the project management. Let me just go back to the estimate one more time. So, when we spoke about the estimate, you had indicated, in a normal case, it might be electric review, a renovation addition, a brand new building. There's a lot of special circumstances here, and things like that. After that, I think John asked the question associated with, are these industry standard numbers? And I think you said yes at that time. And I was thinking we were going to say, no, they're adjusted according to the situations that we face, and that's how we came to this estimate. Can you just clarify, these estimates really your best estimates as you see it without doing a detailed estimate, or are they just industry standard numbers?
There's always a range. Again, without being an estimator, we look to give you a general idea of where the project is going to fall. So within the range of, like I said, the last project was estimated $324 per square foot, but there was a bigger site component to that. So if we looked at this project compared to that, we would go closer to 300, but since there were so many additional items like the piles, like the enhanced structure, it actually crept up towards the $315 mark. So it was on the higher end of the range. Again, it's not a detailed estimate, but within what we know that the construction is typically coming in at right now, we went towards the higher end rather than the lower end.
I think I understand what Mike and Joe are talking about, and I share some concerns as well. I also believe that what I've heard tonight is at some point, very soon, we need to discuss at a work session the project management and how that's going to go about. I think the end person that comes to us is our borough administrator. However, I think what I'm hearing is that we need to know who's coming to you. We need to know who you're going to be comfortable with. We've heard our borough engineer say he's responsible for the exterior, for the location, for the surface, etc. We know what the architect is going to do. We need to know for sure how comfortable you are, and and who you're going to be talking to on a daily basis, overseeing this. So, I think that, you know, we need to be a little bit more comfortable. And I can't, how anybody can expect anything different considering the history of this particular building. So, you know, I hope that gets on the work session agenda. I don't know who's going to be making the agendas in the near future, but it has to come very soon. To the residents that are here, I think the case has been made completely that there is a need for an improved facility here. I would strenuously object with anybody that doesn't feel that we've done due diligence. We really have done our due diligence. You may not agree with what we decided to go forward, but we have considered an endless amount of alternatives. We've listened to our professionals, especially our police chief, and I will tell you that when Chief Bruno leaves Tenafly's police department, he will leave it in a far better place than it was when he got here. And you know, I think that says it all about the measure of our police department. The numbers can give you a method of measurement. The mission that our police department has today, you can't compare it to what the mission was 15 years ago. If you were privy to the activity reports that the governing body gets, it would just blow you away with the breadth of what they have to face on a daily basis. I'm not saying they risk their lives every day. The truth of the matter is they don't know when they're going to risk their lives. But the stuff that our residents and non-residents put them through is just eye-opening to somebody that never realized it before. You only get a tad of it in the newspapers. So I do look forward to a facility. I'm going to go around with a swelled chest bragging about my police station, but a facility that gives our police department an opportunity to do their job without any hindrance and legally meets all the standards of today. Because I frankly get them embarrassed every time I see an inspection report and I see all the no's, all the negatives that are grandfathered in, but it's time to get rid of some of those grandfathers. So unless somebody else has something to say, I didn't know anything there.
No, I think I was pretty clear before when I started the discussion with regard to project management.
Yeah, I will also suggest that the planning board review this once again. We have plenty of time because the bids won't be open for two, and the planning board will take a look at this. But from a planning board perspective, I think the attorney is correct. We pretty much reviewed it from size and the nature of it, the fact that it's removed and attached to the building. I don't think it's going to change the way the planning board looks at it, but I could be wrong. We will report back to the governing body in a very expedient manner as to how that goes.
So we also heard from Bob that there were some comments made. I'm not sure, is it, when could we expect to hear back responses about the construction officials' comments?
I'm looking at you, but I'm not even sure you're the right one. Maybe I should ask him, Joe, you know, whoever.
Or can we ask you to have that response to us before our next work session?
He actually already has the response.
One of them, I do have to work on another. So it should be within the next day or so.
We'll take the construction official at his word that they were very minor.
Okay. A special meeting of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Tenafly, County of Bergen, State of New Jersey, held on Wednesday, July 21st, 2010. Whereas capital ordinance number 09/18 adopted via resolution number R09-345 on September 8, 2009, following a public hearing as required by law, has allocated funding for the project known as the quote addition and renovation of Tenafly Police Headquarters, end quote. And whereas no petitions contesting the validity of said funding ordinance were filed with the Borough Clerk within the estoppel period as set forth in NJSA 48:2-17. Whereas the architect claimed for this purpose, Anthony Iovino, AIAPPLEDD of
Harry and Ivino Architects PC have prepared plans and specifications for the expansion and renovation of the existing police headquarters, and said plans and specifications have been reviewed by the borough attorney, the director of buildings, the construction official, and the appropriate subcode officials. And whereas the chief financial officer has certified that funds are available for this project, now therefore be resolved, the mayor and council hereby authorize receipt of bids for the addition and renovation of Tenafly Police Headquarters at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, August 31st, 2010, in the council chambers, at which time and place said bids shall be opened and read aloud. And be it further resolved, the borough clerk is hereby authorized to advertise for receipt of bids in the Sunday, July 25th, 2010 issue of the record in accordance with the local public contracts law. I move this resolution.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please call, any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilman Barbalato?
Yes.
Councilwoman Levanstra?
Yes.
Councilman Latta?
Yes.
Councilman McDermott?
Yes.
Councilman Rouse?
Yes.
Councilman Warren?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.